hear from you more of that. And having heard all these introductory remarks that we have had in the morning session, we are now moving towards keynote speakers. These are important remarks that we'll be hearing for the rest of the morning and afternoon as well. They'll be introduced by John Palmer, who is an economist who combines theory and practice, also by teaching at the University, Western University, and a member of the Urban Economy Forum Steering Committee indeed. John Palmer, now the floor is yours to take over and introduce the keynote speakers from now on. Thank you very much indeed. John?
Mr. Krishnan, it's my pleasure to be introducing the first set of keynote speakers for this morning. Let me begin by saying that there will be no question and answer session at the end of this, so I'm going to encourage everyone to take notes and then incorporate things that we hear this morning in the later afternoon question and answer sessions. For a few years, I taught in the southern part of England, and during that time, I spent one day in Cambridge, but I spent 3 days in Oxford. And that probably reflects well for the speaker that we're going to start with, Mr. Craig Simmons. One of the many things I noticed when I was in Oxford was that there were a lot of bicycles at the train station. And that fits well with Mr. Simmons, who is the mayor, the Lord Mayor of Oxford, and who is also a keen cyclist and community campaigner, having established the Eastern Oxford Farmers Market and a low-carbon East Oxford, as well as co-founding the Cowley Road Carnival and local car club. Craig lives in East Oxford with his partner and his teenage daughter. Craig, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm also going to try to screen share, but it's been disabled. So I was hoping that someone could enable that for me through the wonders of technology. Let me see. Yep, there we are. Thank you very much. Hopefully you can also now see my screen as well. As nods, which I think is good. Thank you. So, well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I very much enjoyed listening to the other speakers and how you're tackling the very common challenges that we share. Last year, I sent a video to the Urban Economy Forum because I was sort of reluctant to fly to Canada. And this year I can join in person remotely, albeit from my virtual Lord Mayor's parlour, because our town hall is closed due to COVID. So how the world has changed in just 12 months. So like many cities around the world, we're looking to try and use the opportunity presented by the horror that is the coronavirus pandemic to try to build back better. Though we're a sort of very small city, we've adopted the Global Mayor's COVID-19 recovery task force principles, recognizing that we're facing not just a global health crisis, but a social and economic crisis as well, whose effects will last for many, many years to come. And we simply cannot return to business as usual. We must realign our society and our economy to be more sustainable, more resilient and fairer. And things are truly terrible at the moment. I'm reminded of, I mean, it's worse than I can remember it in more than 20 years in local government. But to paraphrase one sort of former Oxford graduate, we may be in the gutter now, but we need to look up at the stars. And nowhere is the need to sort of build back better more evident than our transport systems. We must question, as other speakers have mentioned, not only how we travel, but the need to do so much travelling. And Oxford, like many similar cities, I'm sure this is a shared problem. We have our problems with traffic. Although we have seen improvements, air quality still breaches WHO guidelines, and parts of our city are congested with private cars, which in turn, of course, makes our bus services and our other public transport infrastructure less reliable. Of course, Oxford has a number of transport schemes under development and being implemented over many years. The plans to ban certain polluting vehicles from parts of our town centre, and proposals for more bus gates to prohibit cars from travelling through the city centre. But if you only talk about bans and prohibitions, then we're not frankly going to win many friends. We have to sell the benefits of transforming our communities and the role that transport plays in this. And this picture here is of, this was once a busy sort of rat run between two major roads. Now it's been transformed into sort of outdoor seating in a COVID safe way, so that businesses can continue to operate the way they want to and the way they used to. Now, of course, no one here now would go back to the way it was, and that's really what we're trying to achieve with the transformations we're making. I'm a great fan of the 15-minute city, the idea where everything you need on a regular basis within a 15-minute walk or cycle. This is where I live in East Oxford, and most of what I need, the essential services I need, are available within a 15-minute walk or cycle, except for affordable houses and arguably access to clean air. And there's a debate around that, of course. But we need also to give our streets back to people. This is an area that we converted because of COVID into outdoor seating, reallocated road surfaces back to cafes and restaurants and for pedestrians. And we're now looking to make these changes permanent. Now, we also need to continue to sort of bring the nature back into our cities, create more pocket parks, retrofit green roofs and walls, and make the most of our rivers and streams. And this is just one example of a retrofit to one of our older buildings at Oxford University, St Edmund's Hall. We've also bid for government funds to try to actually sort of make all these things a reality. So we've planning to turn our city into 7 low traffic neighbourhoods. And we're using, it's an extremely cost-effective approach. I'm sure many are aware of this approach or something similar, to giving back residential streets and local shopping centres back to local people. The idea is elegantly simple. Everyone's home can still be accessed by motorised vehicles, by private car or taxi, for emergency services, for online deliveries, increasingly so, waste and recycling collections and so on. But through traffic is blocked by filters that are permeable to pedestrians and cyclists. And these filters can be very simple. They can be as simple as bollards, or they can be as sophisticated as sort of mini pocket parks that actually block access to motorised vehicles. But when rat running traffic is eliminated, the evidence from similar schemes, and there's been a scheme going for many years in London, a very widespread scheme, shows that walking and cycling is enhanced and increased, streets are quieter and safer, air is cleaner, and the sense of community is enhanced. And in these schemes, you see normally quite large opposition to their introduction, but you typically see less than 5% of the people would go back to the way it was before that. But these hyper-local schemes are all very well, and they're essential indeed to building back better and reducing car dependency. But how do we deliver the sort of greener, cleaner services at the city level? How do we ensure that the waste and recycling trucks, the emergency services, the taxis, the delivery vehicles, and the numerous other council and private service vehicles do sort of meet that aspiration to be cleaner and greener? Well, one answer, of course, is electrification. And this is a picture of a waste truck. We're currently trialling an Oxford all-electric waste truck. But the reality is that the local electricity networks in most cities simply can't cope with the power needed to handle these numerous fast chargers that make this sort of approach, wide-scale electrification, practical. And here in Oxford, we're pioneering one possible solution to this problem. On the edge of the city, we're creating an energy super hub, a huge hybrid battery, 50 megawatts, combining lithium-ion and vanadium flow technologies, linked directly to the national grid. And it's under construction now. And this is the description of the project with all the partners, the City Council in partnership with many private sector partners to bring about this energy super hub. It's under construction now, and it's going to be finished within a year and online within a year. And here's what it will look like when it's completed. The energy super hub will not only increase the resilience of our local network, allowing it to better manage local renewable resources, but it will also help with vehicle electrification. It will link to a new high voltage cable that snakes its way around Oxford, providing access points for a network of fast and ultra fast, that's 50 kilowatt, 150 kilowatt plus electric vehicle charging points. Ultimately provide near petrol station filling speeds for private electric vehicles, and by connecting into logistics hubs, bus depots, council's fleet depot, it will help meet the council's commitment to electrify at least 1/4 of its whole vehicle fleet by 2023 and move Oxford closer to being a zero carbon city. So thank you very much for listening. I must apologise in advance. I can't stay too long as I'm just about to go off and chair a council meeting, but thank you very much.
Reza, you wanted to say something, did you? Reza is not unmuted.
Well, while we're waiting
Yes.
for Reza, yeah, there you go. Good.
Yeah. Just I'm browsing some news. I received a news. Maybe I'm not sure. Today is Mayor of Oxford's birthday. That is correct.
Yeah, it's my birthday. That's correct. Yeah.
That is your birthday is correct.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. I get to chair a council meeting on my birthday. That's as exciting as it gets, I'm afraid.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday indeed. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much for participation. Yeah.
Pleasure.
John, is yours.
And since you're such a fan of bicycles, let's talk about bicycles some more, because our next speaker had a big impact on putting bicycle lanes in the city of Victoria, British Columbia. Mayor Lisa Helps is the mayor. She was elected the 52nd mayor of Victoria back in 2014. She takes a long-term, big picture perspective, looking both around the city and around the world for innovative solutions to the pressing challenges that face us. Mayor Helps believes that the best way to address complex challenges is to bring people from a diversity of backgrounds, including us, perspectives and experiences together, and truly to listen to each other. Mayor Helps, the floor is yours.
Great. Good morning. Thank you very much. Happy birthday, Mayor Simmons. Thanks for joining us on your birthday. I am here in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and I'm on the homelands of the Lekwungen speaking people. So for those of us in Canada, we always acknowledge the lands of the people who came before us and who are still here. So that's the Lekwungen speaking people here in Victoria. I'm not going to talk about bicycles today, although I could spend hours talking about that. Certainly not without controversy, but great to see the former mayor that spoke before me and others who will speak about the importance of public transport in building back better and building inclusive and sustainable cities. I am going to talk about three things today very briefly. Victoria 3.0, which is our 20-year resilience plan coming out of COVID. And then I'm going to talk about the right to home. And then I want to talk very briefly about what cities in Canada and around the world need in order to be true partners and to deliver. So I've sent my slideshow to Alex, and if he could put up the first slide. So Victoria 3.0 is the city's recovery, reinvention, and resilience plan. And it looks forward to the next 20 years, but beyond that, through to the 22nd century. So Victoria 3.0 is about building an inclusive, resilient economy and delivering solutions for the 22nd century. So anticipating the challenges that we face as a globe with respect to climate change, inequality, urbanization, and tackling these in really concrete ways. And I should say that it is an economic action plan at its core. A few of the elements embedded in Victoria 3.0, and I'll put the link to it in the chat after I'm finished speaking so you can read it all, but is a focus on youth Indigenous and newcomer businesses. So very deliberately focusing on people who have been left out of the economy, and particularly in COVID, we've seen the effects of that. We're also focusing very deliberately on SDG 11 and SDG 14, which is life underwater, considering that we are an ocean city. And we are working with the Urban Economy Forum and UN Habitat and eventually through the Regent Park World Pavilion to deliberately develop a portion of our city, which we're calling at this point the Arts and Innovation District, to model what SDG 11 can look like, both in the planning process, how we do the planning, and we'll be getting that underway early next year, and also in how cities can build in such a way that looks again to the 22nd century and undoes some of the damage of urbanization in the 20th century. So our local folks are already starting to think about the Arts and Innovation District, excuse me, as Victoria's next 100 years. And we really look forward to partnering with the World Urban Pavilion to make that process and the outcome over the next 2 decades inspiring and a model and a learning opportunity for cities big and small around the world. But we can't do any of this without, and Alex, if you can go to the next slide, without securing the right to home. And of course, this is the theme of these 2 days. In Canada, over the period of the COVID pandemic, a number of cities have come together from large and small, coast to coast to coast here in Canada, and have really focused on the right to home. We developed a call to action that we released just before the throne speech, and we were very happy to see the commitment that the federal government made to the $1 billion for 3,000 units. And 3,000 units is a really great start in terms of addressing chronic homelessness. And there are 250,000 people in Canada on any given night who experience homelessness. And so we have a lot of work to do as a country, but particularly as cities. And what we're calling for in the right to home call to action, first of all, we're saying to provincial and federal governments that cities are positioned to be the agents of transformational change that will enable Canada to become a human rights leader for the 21st century. So people live primarily in cities. As our minister said earlier, 81% of Canadians live in cities. So the government of Canada and the provincial government cannot deliver the right to home without us. And so our message number one is that we are here, coast to coast to coast in cities large and small, to help deliver this right to home. In order to secure the right to housing, and to confront the calamity of the lack of housing in Canada swiftly and strategically, are specific calls to action. And I think it's worth reading these because they resonate with some of the speakers who made introductory remarks to the day about the right to home. Our specific calls are to end homelessness, to protect renters and small landlords, to prevent a wave of evictions that others have mentioned could be coming as a result of the eviction moratoriums being lifted, to provide increased social assistance to match actual living costs. So for example, in British Columbia, the social assistance rate for an apartment is $375, whereas in Victoria, renting a bachelor for anything less than $800 is impossible. So we are calling for an increase to social assistance rates to match the cost of living. We're calling for a curb on unsustainable debt due to arrears. We're calling for, and this is, I don't know if it's a particularly Canadian problem, but it's a particularly distressing one, to stem the discrimination against those living in homelessness or social housing. And there have been lots of good things that have come out of the pandemic, but one of the devastating things that I've witnessed is increased discrimination against people who are poor. And as part of the Right to Housing Working Group, along with federal and provincial governments, we need to tackle that. And then finally, safeguarding our housing stock from speculative investors. So those are some of our calls to action. We will be continuing to press for these and working as cities along with the federal and provincial governments. All right, next slide, and I'm going to whip through these things really quickly. Cities can't do any of these things. We can't develop strong urban economies. We can't be partners in the right to housing unless we have a new fiscal relationship with our provincial and federal governments. We have an election right now in British Columbia, and so BC urban mayors, 13 of us representing 55% of British Columbia's population, have made several calls to those running for office, and one is a new fiscal relationship. So cities in Canada get 8 cents of every tax dollar that people pay, yet we are responsible for 60% of infrastructure, and we are responsible for delivering social programs and many other programs where the property tax base simply cannot cover. Just to give you a small example, and again, going back to our Ocean City work and the Ocean Futures Cluster that we're working on, we've got an amazing company here. They build small autonomous electric boats that go into marine protected areas, and they monitor for fishing and illegal fishing. It's a young woman. She's growing an amazing company, but she works in a small kind of dilapidated building, and all we get is the property taxes that they pay. And so as she grows her company, increases GDP, hires more employees, generates more revenue, the benefit of that doesn't come to cities because again, cities in Canada only get property taxes. So that's just one example. If I had more time, I could probably explain it more clearly, but in order for cities to deliver, we need a different fiscal relationship and more resources. Next slide, please. Not only do we need more resources, we need more authority. And this is here a little bit, almost ridiculous to have to illustrate this, but the City of Victoria in 2017 banned single-use plastic bags. We were immediately taken to court by the Plastic Bag Association of Canada. But then headline number one, our plastic bag bylaw was upheld by the Supreme Court of BC in June 2018. But then the Plastic Bag Association of Canada appealed, and our plastic bag ban was quashed by the BC court. Then we appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada to hear our appeal. As you can see by that headline, Victoria plastic bag ban dead as Supreme Court of Canada rejects appeal. And then finally, BC approves civic bylaws banning single-use plastic bags, province-wide bans on the way. And all of this took 2 years. So my point is that if we are going to deliver sustainable, resilient cities that tackle climate change, that tackle waste, in this case, cities need more authority. It turned out, didn't have the authority to ban plastic bags. We had to wait 2 years for the provincial government to give us permission, and never mind straws and paper cups and styrofoam takeout containers and so on. So cities are poised to deliver. Someone said it earlier. I don't want to flip back to my notes. I think it was the mayor of Helsinki said that we are ready, willing, and able, needed to take the measures necessary. That is true of cities in Canada. It's true of Victoria. In order to do so, we need a little bit more authority to enact what are, in my opinion, common sense solutions for the 21st and the 22nd century. I'll leave it there. That was a lot of information in a short time. You can find me to follow up. My email address is mayor@victoria.ca. I'm pretty easy to find. So thanks, and I'll look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Mayor Helps. It'll be interesting now to move on to Mayor Iveson from Edmonton, Alberta. We know that Alberta's had some fiscal difficulties lately, but Mayor Iveson has been working very diligently there, despite the provincial fiscal difficulties. And I have a bit of an attachment to Edmonton, I must say. I've visited former students out there, gone out to organized conferences, and I've spent probably close to 40 years out there visiting in-laws, which is probably the strongest connection I have to Edmonton. Mayor Iveson, prior to entering public life, studied political science at University of Alberta. Then he served as the president of the Canadian University Press in Toronto. Since his election as Edmonton's 35th mayor in 2013, Mayor Iveson has led Edmonton's transformation into a more uplifting, resilient, and he hopes a globally competitive city. Mayor Iveson?
Well, thanks very much for that, and you're always welcome. Anyone's welcome in Edmonton. It's one of the most welcoming places I know. It's why I love working here. It's great to see Mayor Helps and other public servants, great leaders from across this country, and I'm really privileged to get to work in addition to leading the city of Edmonton with, I get the chance to work with Canada's big city mayors, and so wearing two hats, one as Mayor of Edmonton and working to end homelessness here in our own backyard, and also working with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Big City Mayors Caucus in particular. I'm really grateful for the invitation to speak to you all here today on the progress our country is making on the issues of affordable housing and how here in Canada, cities are partnering with the federal government to end homelessness, which is now exacerbated by the pandemic that we're all facing. And we're going to do this by ensuring that every Canadian has access to a safe and affordable place to call their own. It's high time. Ending homelessness means dignity for all Canadians, as well as massive savings to the provincial health and justice systems, reduced demand for our policing, and reduced social disorder, which is an increasing concern for our businesses. And Canada's big city mayors are eager to partner with the federal government and provincial governments to make this happen in our country, finally. Now, when the pandemic hit, Edmontonians experiencing homelessness were top of mind for me. And so we worked with all levels of government to provide shelter space that provided 24/7 programming and other supports that would allow homeless individuals in our city to self-isolate, a privilege and a luxury when you own a home, but nearly impossible when you're experiencing homelessness. Now, the pandemic has lasted longer than we initially anticipated, and it became clear that we wouldn't have had to worry about creating shelter spaces if we'd tackled the problem of homelessness straight on through our Housing First model. And so in August, I pushed for an ambitious 10-week plan to end homelessness in Edmonton, which called on the provincial and federal governments to invest in housing, specifically hotels and other available buildings that could be quickly activated in bridge housing or into permanent supportive housing. And this plan closely echoes FCM's Affordable Housing Acquisition Campaign, which called for a federal initiative and partnership to help community housing providers acquire, repair, and retrofit available buildings for not-for-profit housing. And this is why we're pleased to see the federal government announce a new rapid housing initiative, the RHI, which includes $1 billion for the construction of modular housing and the acquisition of land and the conversion of existing buildings like hotels into affordable housing. The federal government expects this support to urgently also create up to 3,000 new affordable housing units. And we've also asked for an additional, or received from the federal government, an additional $236.7 million through Reaching Home, which is Canada's homelessness strategy to help extend and expand the emergency response to COVID-19 outbreak. This funding is in addition to the $157.5 million announced back in April to help community entities address the immediate impacts of the pandemic upon Canadians experiencing homelessness. So this announcement just the other week came after extensive engagement with our federal partners, and it directly responds to FCM's proposal for a federal initiative and partnership to help community housing providers acquire, repair, and retrofit available buildings for not-for-profit housing. This commitment opened the door to real solutions to the problem of homelessness and brought some renewed hope to some of Canada's most vulnerable residents and the folks working on the front lines who've been serving them for years. And this also lays the groundwork for an even closer partnership with the federal government, which is what we're always looking for through FCM and the big city mayors. This announcement altogether represents a promising step in achieving our city's goal to end homelessness. And just a little bit of context for it, the 10-week plan to end homelessness was a bit of a moment of frustration because I'd been saying over the last year that, you know, being in our 11th year of our 10-year plan to end homelessness, and notwithstanding that we've successfully housed nearly 10,000 people using Housing First, we're still not at our goal. And there's still unnecessary demand for healthcare and justice, unnecessary challenges for police, unnecessary social disorder in our business districts, all avoidable high-cost challenges that were there before the pandemic, but that this virus has so egregiously exacerbated. So there is still more work to do. Much broader investments in housing will be key to Canada's economic recovery. And from Montreal to Toronto to Edmonton to Calgary to Vancouver, we still have people living in tent encampments trying to maintain physical distance. And of course, it's getting colder and colder. And with winter, the flu season, and a possible second wave of COVID-19 all bearing down, going slow is simply not an option. So to protect our most vulnerable and build a better, more inclusive Canada coming out of this, we absolutely need to get moving right now. And cities through FCM are ready to work with our partners to drive results on the ground, just as we do every day. So during the throne speech, it was music to our ears to hear the federal government make a historic commitment to completely eliminate chronic homelessness. Their goal before this was to reduce homelessness by half, which we've shown here in Edmonton as an achievable goal. And there's no time like the present to get focused on completely eliminating chronic homelessness in our cities and communities across this country. And so we welcome this ambitious goal that will not only save lives, will also create jobs. It will reduce cost centers and the most expensive services that provinces provide, just at the time where they're asking Ottawa for even more money. And of course, most importantly, it will protect vulnerable Canadians and keep people out of our emergency rooms at a time where we all need them to be available to us in the event of a second wave. So we cannot overstate the urgency of moving forward on affordable and supportive housing, and how fundamental this strong federal municipal partnership will be to meet our shared goal of ending chronic homelessness. But cities are ready to work directly with the federal government to ensure Canadians are supported today so that we can help ensure a successful recovery tomorrow. And so we want to tackle urgent COVID challenges in our communities in ways that also build for the future. And this will take extensive ongoing partnership among orders of government. But I think we've seen through this crisis that where there's a will, where there's urgency, governments are able to get over themselves, get past egos, get past old broken relationships, and get things done for our communities. Because we all serve the same Canadians wherever they live, urban or rural, north or south, English or French, a newcomer or Indigenous. We all serve the same people. And I think in that sense, the virus has given us an opportunity to show our Canadian mettle, show that we are there for each other, show that we're going to leave no one behind, and especially this winter, leave no one out in the cold. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Iveson. That was very clear. I've always tried to relate something about my past to one of the upcoming speakers. And believe it or not, I do have something in common with Sylvia Ganzerla. She has a master's degree in European Social Policy Evaluation from Bath University. And I must say that one of the best trips I ever took, one of the best weekend trips I ever took while I was teaching in England was to Bath. Sylvia is a policy director in Eurocities, where she is responsible for social and economic policies at the urban level. Previously, she worked in a consultancy and she managed studies related to sustainable development. She holds a master's degree in local development from the University of Birmingham, in addition to her master's degree in European Social Policy Evaluation from Bath. Sylvia?
Thank you very much. It's nice to see that we have some connection through Bath University. Great place to be and to study, very nice memory. So, good morning, everybody. I'm very delighted to be here with you today at the Second Economic Forum, which takes place in conjunction with the World Habitat Day. Today, we have a unique opportunity to reflect on the achievements and challenges still lying ahead of us in fulfilling these ambitious goals of Agenda 2030. For a long time, cities have been seen only as a challenge for sustainable development, with urbanization considered as a problematic trend, causing pollution and destroying nature. Equally, cities have been often notorious for their sharp inequalities, polarization, and social tension. But if we look at more recent evidence, urbanization is far from being an intractable problem, and cities are now part of a solution. it is clear that many cities are now leading actors in the transformative agenda towards a more sustainable, socially inclusive, and prosperous society. One of the strengths of Agenda 2030 is that it fully recognizes the role of cities for the green, inclusive, and sustainable transition. Goal 11 specifically is dedicated to urban and sustainable communities, but it's also possible to identify an urban dimension in all of the 17 SDGs. In other words, it is clear that cities can and have to make a difference to our society by bringing a positive impact in addressing climate change, fighting poverty, promoting well-being and health, ensuring growth and inclusive economy. Based on my work as a policy director at Eurocities, which is the network of major European cities based in Brussels, I would like to share with you some reflection. I would like to start by saying that Agenda 2030 will not be successful if it is taken as a top-down agenda. The transformative power of the SDG is to look at this agenda as a policy tool that requires a truly bottom-up approach. It has been estimated that 65% of SDG-related actions can be achieved only if cities take concrete steps. Even more important, with cities being responsible for 60% of public investment, cities have to be part of the game. Cities are not just passive actors implementing SDG. They have an active role to play in shaping SDG. The Sustainable Development Goals are setting out very general principles that are valid worldwide. However, it is up to the local governments to translate them into meaningful and concrete actions that make sense to the local context and are in line with the real local needs. This is to say, the cities have to adapt SDG to the local context, address local weaknesses, and capitalize on local strength. But what are the main leverage to unlock the city potential? I would like to mention some of the most important. And I would like to start with the issue of finance for sustainable urban development. Cities can put in place a range of policy instruments to reorientate flows towards sustainable needs. For example, some European cities, such as Copenhagen and Paris, have issued green bonds to finance energy climate projects and achieve climate-related objectives. The bonds are issued in partnership with banks and are aimed at attracting private investors. Other cities, such as the German cities of Bonn, Münster, and Stuttgart, have set up policy for defining clear criteria for public investment and disinvestment. According to this policy, the cities are excluding investment that cause CO2 emissions, such as investment in fossil energy. A second crucial leverage is sustainable procurement. One of the main instruments cities have at their disposal is the strategic use of public procurement to embed social and environmental consideration into procurement policy. Many cities are already using their buying power to shape more inclusive labor markets and sustainable cities. For example, Oslo has set up a new procurement process to reduce CO2 emission. With sustainable procurement practices, the city also aims to improve circular economy, including full life cycle assessment of services and products. Several other cities, such as Hamburg, have also included green criteria in public procurement in sectors such as waste management, energy, transport, and buildings. The third leverage I would like to mention is setting up local investment platform for boosting long-term investment in social infrastructure, such as social housing, schools, hospitals, and healthcare centers. These platforms are meant to promote a dialogue between city leaders, investors, and financial institutions. They aim to attract private investors and enhance public and private partnership as a viable way to close the gap in social infrastructure investments. Another leverage is to tap into local innovation ecosystem. Scientific research, innovation and technology are central to enable the transition towards sustainable development. These stakeholders can identify solutions that can be implemented at local level. Researchers and urban policymakers can work together to create a sustainable urban science that reach out across different disciplines. We have many examples of cities creating innovation labs and knowledge hubs. Typically, these labs and hubs are based on the concept of quadruple helix approach. It is a concept where public sectors, private businesses, science, civil society, including citizens, are all coming together to co-create solutions to complex urban challenges that are related to urban sustainability. The final leverage that I would like to mention is mutual learning between cities. Activities of peer learning and knowledge transfer are proven to enhance local capacity for sustainable urban development. A city network association like Eurocities has mutual learning in its mission, and we often engage other level of governments, NGOs, private sectors with a view to maximize impact. Before I conclude, I would like to spend a few words about COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities. Cities have been at the center of a pandemic, and it is at local level that the socio-economic consequences of the crisis are most visible. At the same time, cities have been at the front line in responding to the pandemic, ensuring continuity of essential services, extending shelter capacity, redeploying municipal budgets, and setting up new emergency measures. And now we are working very strong towards a recovery plan. The COVID-19 pandemic has made the call for systemic change even more urgent, and SDG offers the right framework to accelerate this progress. To conclude, cities are at the right intermediate scale between the local and the global level to deliver on SDG. They can deliver impact in a much more effective way than national governments acting alone. We have many examples of cities that are increasingly exercising their leadership in driving our society towards more sustainable models. And there are many other cities that are striving to unlock their potential. This task, however, requires a lot of commitment, energy, and the right level of investment. We also need to further invest in mutual learning activities and capacity building programs for cities. And we also know that cities are at the core of the SDG transformative agenda, but we also need to have the right governance mix, the right interplay between the global level, national, NGOs, business sectors, science and technology, and citizens. Cities, like people, are all different, but they also share similar trends, challenges, and can adopt similar solutions to drive the sustainable transformation. My call for today is to work all together to create and capitalize on our mutual synergies and strength to collectively deliver on the SDG agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. And in keeping with your mentions of economic policy, I'd like to recommend two things. First of all, that people compare and contrast the writings of Pigou with the writings of Ronald Coase, but also stay tuned for my presentation about fiscal sustainability and fiscal crises this afternoon. Our next speaker is Frank DeHaan. And Frank, in the past, I've tried to illustrate some personal connection I have with each of the speakers somehow. And unfortunately, the only thing I can come up with is that the river that I live above has some carp in it. And that's not a very good connection, I guess. So what I'm going to say is that Frank de Haan is the Secretary General of ISOCARP. He's the founding member and director of Territorial Capital Institute, which is a knowledge-based platform to exchange theory and praxis of integrated territorial development and placemaking, drawing upon his experiences on localizing the new urban agenda and the international guidelines on urban and territorial planning. Frank has worked for 15 years in the European Union, mainly on cross-border and transnational planning issues, followed by another 15 years outside the EU. And let me tell you, working cross-border stuff with various degrees of federalism must be one heck of a challenge. Frank? You have to unmute, Frank.
Unmute myself. Yes, yes. Thank you, John. Yes, okay. I hope I can be heard.
Yes.
Alex, can you put up my slides? Oh yeah, wonderful. Yes, thank you so much. And yeah, what another honor to be part of this virtual urban economy forum. But personally, I would have preferred to be with all of you in Toronto. But let's thank technology that we can at least stay socially connected while being physically distanced. Over the past couple of months, ISOCARP and UEF have established a new and solid partnership resulting in UEF's commitment as a major co-host of our upcoming 56th World Planning Congress between 8 November and 4 February, not November, 4 February 2021. On this day, we celebrate both the opening of this lovely forum, as well the World Habitat Day. In the remaining time, I will simply read out what we drafted last night as an ISOCARP statement for this year's World Habitat Day, with some specific references to the importance of sustainable urban economy. Yes, the next slides. Okay. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 has really demonstrated the fragility of our urbanized world. The pandemic comes at a time when urbanization was already facing enormous challenges, primarily due to the effects of the current economic development model that makes cities less affordable and more unsustainable, unfortunately. Precarious urban informality is increasing at a fast pace due to inadequate legislative, regulatory, institutional, and financial frameworks. The territorial management of towns, cities, and metropolitan areas is a main challenge for governments, urban professionals, and civil society. The implementation of the 2030 Agenda, including SDG 11, is basically off track, we have to acknowledge. Next slide. While 95% of the confirmed cases of COVID-19, with 95% of the confirmed cases of COVID-19, urban areas are at the epicenter of the pandemic. We have seen hospitals overflowing, jobs disappearing, schools being closed, and movements restricted in cities around the world. Next. Yes. Urban and regional planning professionals are yet to be fully recognized as key enablers of a green urban recovery. They support both decision makers and civil society to build the essential frameworks and make large cities affordable, inclusive, resilient, sustainable, and safe. Urban and regional planning has a history of more than 100 years of integrating policies, plans, and designs to find solutions for complex problems and to adapt the physical environment of our cities and territories. Next one, please. Yes, sorry, I have an issue. Yeah. Okay, since 1965, the International Society of City and Regional Planners, ISOCARP, brings together highly qualified planners from more than 85 countries worldwide who work in the public, private, and non-profit sectors. Members of the society share a common interest in cooperation and international networking in order to facilitate the improvement of our cities and territories through planning practice, training, research, and education. Next one, please. ISOCAR fully supports the World Habitats Day theme, which calls this year for housing for all, a better urban future. We agree with UN Habitat that housing is now widely recognized as a frontline defense against COVID-19, with residents across the world being told to stay at home and wash their hands. But these simple measures are impossible for the 1.8 billion people living in inadequate housing conditions, informal settlements, overcrowded homes, homelessness, and unstable housing conditions, often lacking access to clean water. Yes. Temporary measures need to lead to long-term policy changes. At the same time, we must recognize that providing adequate housing is a shared responsibility which depends on national and local governments, civil society, business, and local communities working together. Yes. We advocate actually planning in line with the international guidelines on urban and territorial planning, the so-called IGUTP, and its 12 key planning principles that should be a prominent concern for all city and political officials and at the forefront of their agenda, especially as cities are at the epicenter of the pandemic, while they are at the same time significant contributors to the economic development of their country. Yes. Okay. Sorry. It's yes. In search for a better policy coordination across policy levels, we recall that national urban policies can provide a coherent set of decisions derived through a deliberate government-led process of coordinating and rallying various actors for a common vision and goal that will promote more transformative, productive, inclusive, and resilient urban development for the long term. Next one. Yes. And to respond to multiple crises and to build back better and greener, this requires high-level urbanization expertise in national and local governments, in academia, and on the side of other stakeholders. Therefore, we call for a sufficient funding of planning institutions and capacity building for all stakeholders. And then the last statement is that we call upon all members and partners of ISOCAR to support the process to recover better and greener after the pandemic in their own professional activities. We invite all urban stakeholders to take part in our upcoming 56th and the first virtual World Planning Congress on post-oil cities, planning for urban green deals, assets spread over a period of 3 months, starting on 8 November, which is also World Town Planning Day. Yes, next one. So let me wish you good luck with the rest of this wonderful Urban Economy Forum, and hope to see you soon in cyberspace at our Congress. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Frank. It was good to hear from you. Our next speaker, I believe, is present. Good, I see you. You're on the screen, Mr. Hassan Malikpour. But as I understand it, this treasured architect has a video presentation for us. Is that correct?
Yes, I will play the video right now.
Today I'm speaking to Hassan Malikpour, architect and designer, who has dedicated his career into enhancing the quality of space. My name is Mustafa Zafari. I'm an architect and urbanist, and I have dedicated my career into enhancing the experience of the practice of everyday life. The aim of this hard talk is to enhance the discourse of architecture. حسن ملکی بود، خوش آمدید.
سلام، مرسی.
از همین کافه شروع کنیم. سام کافه تهران که شما طراحیش کردید. زمانی که شما این کافه را طراحی کردین، تهران کافه‌های زیادی نداشت. ما امروز با بیش از 6000 کافه یکی از پرکافه ترین شهرهای جهان هست، چه به لحاظ نسبی چه به لحاظ مطلق. اما شما اینجا یک کاری کردین که بر فرهنگ کافه نشینی و بر فرهنگ گفتگو میان شهروندان در فضای شهری اثری زیاد و ماندگار گذاشتید. شما دقیقا اینجا چی کار کردید؟
من با همکاری‌های زیادی با پروژه‌های دولتی، نیمه دولتی و عمومی داشتم برای ایجاد فضای عمومی. به نوع اینا موفق نبودم. فکر کردم شاید با بخش خصوصی بشه این موضوع رو گسترش داد، چون بخش خصوصی تو ایران خیلی جدیه و چون در واقع متکثر از نظر تعداد و رقابت میکنه، بنابراین فرصت خوبی بود که بشه از طریق اینها یک فضای عمومی هتروژن ایجاد کرد، یعنی هر کی با اهداف و آرزوهای خودش رو پیش ببره. موضوع کافه هم تو ایران موضوعی بود مربوط به یه فضایی که خیلی مناسب نبود تو ذهن مردم، چه کار کردن تو کافه، چه کافه رفتن و چه کافه داشتن.
کاملا درست.
سعی کردم اینو تغییر بدم و یه آمبیانس دیگه ایجاد کنم. صاحب اینجا آقای محسن مجیدی خواه که واقعا خیلی نقش مهمی توی این ماجرا داشت، من همیشه ازش ممنونم، همیشه ازش یاد میکنم. خیلی همراهی کرد و یه کافه یا اولین کافه به این صورت به وجود اومد و این جریان شد برای اینکه اصلا ذهنیت راجع به کافه و کافه‌داری تغییر بکنه و آنچه که در معماری میدونستم رو هم کنار این موضوع آوردم و خوشبختانه یه اتفاقی افتاد که خودم هم فکر نمی‌کردم که موفق باشه.
خیلی جالب. اصلا شما پروژه‌های زیادی دارید. این کافه یکیشه. کتاب فروشی این مجموعه یکی دیگه شه. خانه شفیعی، خانه‌های دیگه، پروژه‌های دیگه‌ای دارید. اما هر زمانی که من با شما صحبت می‌کنم یک کلیدواژه ذهن شما رو تسخیر کرده. کیفیت. انگار یک کیفیت خاصی هست که دنبالش هستی و توی پروژه‌ها دائم می‌خوای بگی من دنبال این کیفیتم. من می‌خوام این کیفیت رو ارتقا بدم. اون کیفیت چیه؟ چه اثراتی داره؟
من فکر کنم که هر موجودی منحصر به فرده، هر موجودی و دنبال ساختن جهانی هم، دنبال ساختن فضایی هم، منظورم دیسیپلین رشته معماری بود، دنبال ساختن فضایی هم که هر کسی منحصر به فردی خودش رو بتونه توش زندگی کنه، ولی در قالب یک کلیت که ما حالا بهش میگه وحدت، یعنی کسرت در وحدت به این صورت اتفاق بیفته. آنچه که مبنای این در واقع موضوع میتونه باشه اینه که چجوری این منحصر به فردی ها کنار هم قرار بگیره و این منحصر به فردی ها به چه صورت تشکیل بشن که بتونن کنار هم دیگه قرار بگیرن و بعد همه اینها با هم دیگه یه جهان رو درست کنن، یه جهانی که یک پارچه است و هر کسی منحصر به فردی خودش رو داره. به اون جهان من میگم جهان کیفی و به جهانی که هموژنه، همه این فضاها در واقع همگون در یک جریان غالب قرار دارن، من میگم جهان کمی. و در جهان کمی موضوعاتی که مطرح میشه عدد، اندازه است، تکراره، در صورتی که در جهان هتروژن تکرار نداریم، هر چیزی منحصر به فرده در این لحظه و لحظه بعدی هم دوباره من در لحظه بعدی دوباره تغییر کردم. برقراری ارتباط بین این اجزا، بین این تفاوت‌ها اگر درست اتفاق بیفته من بهش میگم تناسب و محصول این کیفیته، واژه‌اش کیفیته.
الان که داری صحبت می‌کنی من احساس می‌کنم شما معمار فضا هستید. آیا کیفیتی که شما داری صحبت می‌کنی، معماری، کیفیتی که می‌خواید به وجود بیاری، کیفیت فضاست یا کیفیت زیسته؟ شاید به من بگید این دوتا با هم دیگه مرتبطن. بله مرتبط هستن ولی متفاوتن. هدف شما اون چیزی که هدف گرفتی، اون چیزی که می‌خوای بهش برسی اینه که فضای متفاوتی ایجاد کنی یا اینکه می‌خوای یک کیفیت زیست متفاوتی ایجاد کنی. با من که حرف می‌زنی من فکر می‌کنم که تو توی مرحله فضا وای نیستی. درست فکر می‌کنم؟ برام بگو.
ببین من فضا رو یه استراتژی میدونم امروز که ما رو میتونه به فکر کنم بهترین راهبرد برای گذار از فضای کمی به فضای کیفیه. مهمترین ابزار، قوی‌ترین ابزاری که ما داریم فضاست برای این کار. امیدوارم که به فضای کیفی برسیم و من تو اون دوره زنده باشم، اون وقت فقط فضای کیفی کار کنم، در واقع فضا رو به عنوان یه راهبرد برای گذار نبینم. خیلی دوست دارم این کار کنم. برای بعضی مشتریام هم سعی میکنم که اونا تو فضای کیفی زندگی میکنن اون کار رو بکنم. ولی اصل موضوع به نظرم اون چیزی که امروز من روش میخوام بحث کنم اینه که فضای ابزاریه برای اینکه ما گذار کنیم از فضای کمی به فضای کیفی و طبیعتاً به عنوان استراتژی یه جایی به کیفیت زیست میپردازه، یه جایی توجه میده، یه جایی میخواد ما رو از این موضوعی دور کنه، یه جایی میخواد ما رو به یه موضوعی نزدیک کنه، یه جایی میخواد حتی یه تمرکزی که من باش مسئله دارم رو یه تمرکزی رو ایجاد کنه که یه اتفاقی در پی اون بیفته. چون در مراحل رشد ما یه جایی ممکنه که حتی نیاز به تمرکز داشته باشیم برای اینکه یه موضوعی بتونه حل بشه و ما از اون رد بشیم. بنابراین کیفیت زیسته هست، ولی کیفیت زیست برای همه. موضوع من اکثریت نیست. من با این بخش امروز جهان که میگه جهان فضای اکثریت مشکل دارم. جهان باید فضای جهان همه باشه، همه، و این در اون منحصر فردیه و در اون وحدت میتونه تشکیل بشه. بنابراین نمیدونم که این کیفیت مربوط به زیسته یا مربوط به خیلی چیزای دیگه است، چون ما هنوز اون فضا رو هم کامل نمیشناسیم. واقعا نمیدونیم که فضایی که مربوط به آدمای زشته یا فضایی که مربوط به آدمای ضعیف و ناتوانه یا به آدمایی که هوش کمتری دارن، این فضا رو هنوز در دنیا به وجود نیاوردیم. ما هنوز دنبال فضایی هستیم که مربوط به قدرته. فضاهای ضعیف رو هنوز به وجود نیاوردیم. بنابراین این که مربوط به کیفیت زیسته یا مربوط به کیفیت فضاست، همه اینا با هم دیگه است، ولی هدف اون حال خوشیه که باید بین همه موجودات باشه، حتی مرچه‌ها. من دوستی دارم اون ظرف عسل میاد صبح میخواد بذاره، مرچه اومده، مرچه ها رو میخوابن شبا، این مرچه ها کنار عسل میخورن، مرچه ها رو بیدارشون میکنه، با دستمال کاغذی برشون میداره، دعواشون میکنه، میگه که بریم اومدین اینجا چیکار، نمیکشنشون تا چند دقیقه به این میپرزه. در واقع کیفیت زیست اونها الان
خیلی جالبی که شما این موضوع رو مطرح میکنید. اگر ما به کارهای شما دقت کنیم، به نظر میرسه اون کیفیتی که شما میخواین ایجاد کنید کیفیت موردیه. یه فضای مثل این کافه، مثل اون کتاب فروشی، مثل فضای داخل ساختمون. من میخوام بدونم فضایی که شما ایجاد میکنید و کیفیتی که میخواین ایجاد کنید چقدر قابلیت تکرار شوندگی، قابلیت تبدیل به یک روال داره. چون شما یه شعار جالبی دارین میگین چرا تکرار، در حالی که به نظر من برای زندگی روزمره تکرار لازمه. نظر شما چیه؟
مرسی، خیلی سوال خوبی. من الان دارم پروژه های مقیاس های مختلف اون فضا رو میسازم. یعنی از اتاق طراحی کردم، اجزای اتاق طراحی کردم، تا یه خونه کوچیک، تا یه خونه بزرگتر، تا یه کتاب فروشی کوچیک، کافه های مختلف، پروژه شهری، توسعه شهری، که بگم که این موضوع در مقیاس های مختلف به چه صورت در میاد. که بعد از تحقق این فضاها حالا بشه راجبش حرف زد، چون قبلش که حرف دیگه. وقتی خود فضای باشه حالا میشه راجب فضای حرف زد. طبیعتاً این وقتی جای خودش رو پیدا بکنه، موقعی که میخواد منتشر بشه، حتما باید که قابلیت تکرار شوندگی پیدا کنه، برای اینکه باید تبدیل به یه دانش بشه. اینا الان پروژه های دونه دونن که هر کدومش خیلی جالب و دقیقاً، ولی شاید نیاز باشه من خودم همیشه اون کارا رو بکنم. اگر بخوام شاگردی داشته باشم، اینو به شاگردم منتقل کنم، باید تبدیل به دانش بشه و قابلیت انتقال پیدا کنه. اونجا حتما یه سری از ویژگی‌هاشو از دست میده، ولی اصلا اهمیت نداره. و در واقع اینجاست که تکرار به صورتی موضوع رو فراگیر میکنه.
مثلا ملک‌پور، بذار این سوال ازتون بپرسم. شما شهر رو دوست دارید؟
آره، من کلا موجودات رو خیلی دوست دارم. موجودات رو طبیعتم دوست دارم، شهرم دوست دارم. مثلا خونه من خارج شهر تو یه روستاست. آره، شهر رو خیلی دوست دارم. طبیعتم دوست دارم، ولی طبیعتی که هم به فشار میاره، طبیعت سنگینه.
جالبه که شما میگین شهر رو دوست دارید، به خاطر اینکه شما یک صفحه در اینستاگرام دارید که خیلی جالبه. این سفر رو بیشتر از اینکه صفحه شخصی شما باشه، من به عنوان یک پروژه می‌بینم و حالا توصیه می‌کنم که بینندگان ما صفحه شما رو ببینن. در این سفر اگر ما ببینیم به ندرت پیش میاد یا میشه گفت تقریبا اصلا وجود نداره یک عکسی که شما شهر رو از بالا ببینید، بافت شهری رو ببینید، عشق به این پیچیدگی بافت شهری رو ببینید. تصاویر همه تصاویر مینیمال، تصاویر فوکس شده. به نظر میسه انقدر شما زوم میکنید روی این پروژه برای اینکه اون کیفیت به وجود بیارین که از اون تصویر بزرگه یا غافل میشین یا اینکه واقعا اون شهر رو اونقدری که باید یک پروژه دوست داشته باشین ندارید. احساستون نسبت به شهر بهم بگو. من میدونم شاید خیلی موجودات زیادی رو دوست داشته باشین. شهر رو چقدر دوست دارید؟ چقدر عاشقشید؟ عاشقش هستی؟
آره. ببین چرا شهر رو خیلی دوست دارم. کلا زندگی رو خیلی، من عاشق زندگیم. ولی مسائل جدی با زندگی امروز دارم و دوست دارم که اون مسائل رو حل بکنیم. مسئله‌ای که امروز شهر داره اینه که فضای کمیت توش غلبه پیدا کرده و همه دارن در واقع همه بازیگرای اون فضا. خیلی نزدیکیم به اون فضای کیفی، یعنی شاید 10-20 سال دیگه ما تو اون فضا باشیم. موضوع من الان اینه که بتونم کمک کنم که اون فضای کیفیت تشکیل بشه. این صفحه اینستاگرام بیشتر توجه داره میده. فضای کمیت به نظر من تمرکز داره، فضای کیفیت توجه داره. توجه یعنی به همه چی ما توجه داریم همزمان. تمرکز یعنی زوم میکنیم روی یه نقطه‌ای و برای ایجاد اون توجه فکر کردم در شروع این پروژه، چون این صفحه یکم جوانه دیگه، هنوز خیلی چیز نداره.
بذار من اینجوری ازتون بپرسم، تو این صفحه 2 تا تصویر هست که عمیقاً اعجاب برانگیزه. به عنوان آرشیتکت عمیقاً اعجاب برانگیزه ولی عجیبه. یه تصویری هست از یک آب و یک برکه‌ای و شما زیرش نوشتین سنترال پارک نیویورک. یه تصویر دیگه هست از آسمون و یک افقی که معلومه و شما نوشتین استان آذربایجان حوالی تبریز. ولی این 2 تا شهرهای بسیار مهمی هستن. نیویورک خب مخصوصا سنترال پارک نیویورک در تاریخ در واقع فضاهای سبز شهری و اتفاقاتی که به لحاظ در واقع تاریخی و فرهنگی و اجتماعی در نیویورک افتاده فوق‌العاده مکان تاریخی است. تبریز محل احیای جنبش مشروطه ایرانه، اما اون چه ما از نیویورک می‌بینیم یک برکه آبه و اون چه از تبریز می‌بینیم یک در واقع یک افقی از یک خیابون، از یک آسمون. شما به چی دارین توجه می‌کنید؟ چه چیزی رو دارین بهش توجه می‌کنید؟ چرا از خط آسمان نیویورک، چرا بافت شهری تبریز، چرا بازار تبریز که بزرگترین بازار سرپوشیده جهانه تو اون عکس نیست ولی خط آسمان و برکه آب توش هست؟
من میخوام بگم که موقعیت‌ها اجزایی دارن. وقتی میگیم بازار تبریز نمیتونیم بگیم که این موقعیت‌ها اجزایی دارن، ولی وقتی میگیم که من اون لحظه از پنجره هواپیما دارم یه افقی رو میبینم که این خط بالای ابرهاست و از خلبان پرسیدم اونجا که چند کیلومتر فاصله داریم تا اون خط، نمیدونست. برای من خیلی مهمه که الان اینجا کجای کره زمینه، ما تو چه موقعیتی هستیم. حالا من دیگه به نظرم اگزاجره است که بگم که موقعیت جغرافیایی کره زمین در کهکشان کجاست یا در منظومه شمسی، ولی همه اینا مهمه. ما اگه بخوایم تو فضا کیفیت قرار بگیریم باید تمام موقعیت‌ها رو بشناسیم. طبیعتاً اون آب تو سنترال پارک در اون موقعیت در اون تاریخ با آب تو سنترال پارک در 6 ماه بعدش فرق میکنه. حتما موجوداتی که تو اون آب زندگی میکنن، باکتری‌ها که زندگی میکنن تغییر میکنن. ما عکسی که فعلا میگیریم همینقدر گویاست، بیشتر گویا نیست.
ولی گویای نگاه شما به شهره. اجازه بدید من این سوال ازتون بپرسم. شما با برنامه اسکان بشر ملل متحد یون هابیتات کار کردید و همچنان هم کار میکنید. اگر ما بخوایم نگاه یون هابیتات رو به مقوله شهر نگاه کنیم، بخوایم اسناد یون هابیتات رو مطالعه کنیم، اجندای هابیتات، اجندای اول 1976 در ونکوور، هابیتات اجندای 2996 در استانبول، هابیتات اجندای 3 2016 در کیتو. در همه اینها نقش معماری یا میتونم بگم خیلی ضعیفه یا میتونم بگم نیست. آیا یون هابیتات در نگاهش به معماری غفلت کرده؟
نه.
یا اینکه نگاهی در واقع متعمدانه است که متفاوت از نگاه شماست؟
معماری خیلی صحبت از کیفیت میکنه، ولی در واقع در جهان قالب کمی معماری داره به روش کمی میخواد مشکلات کمی رو حل کنه و این به جایی نمیرسه. نمیتونیم به روش‌های کمی مشکلات کمی رو حل کنیم. جهان کمی مسائل خودشو داره و ما باید به روش‌های کیفی مسائل کمی رو حل کنیم. معماری نیاز داره به یه تغییر بنیادین در نگاهش و تبدیل میشه به یه چیز دیگری، یه مدارس دیگری، یک دانش دیگری، یک اساتید دیگری و با ور رفتن با این اون اتفاق نمیفته. ما نیاز به یک نگاه جدید داریم در معماری.
و شما می‌خواید نگاه جدید رو می‌خواید ایجاد کنید.
من سعی کردم که اونو انجام بدم و بعد ببینم که بعدش چی میشه. هیچ موقع نمیدونستم که به کجا میرسه، ولی نسبت بهش یه موضع مشخصی داشتیم.
به نظر من الان فرصت خوبیه. ممکنه بسیاری از مدیران UN هابیتات و حتی مدیر اجرایی این مصاحبه ما رو و این صحبت ما رو نگاه کنن. من از شما میخوام که به دوربین نگاه کنید و یک چیزی از مدیران UN هابیتات بخواید. توصیه بهشون نکنید، ازشون بخواید.
زیرساخت‌های لازم برای ایجاد فضای کیفی فراهم نیست. خواسته من اینه که امکانات لازم برای شناخت وضع موجودمون به صورت مربوط به گذار به فضای کیفی و زیرساخت‌های لازم برای ایجاد فضای کیفی، دانشش، بسترش، پروژه‌هاش فراهم بشه و طبیعتاً سازمان اسکان، برنامه اسکان بشر ملل متحد نقش خیلی کلیدی میتونه توی این موضوع داشته باشه. ممنون.
حسن ملکپور.
Thank you very much, Hassam. As a prize-winning photographer myself, and as a person who has lived in a number of different sized communities, I treasured what you had to say about liking all kinds of places to live, no matter what they are, and valuing quality over quantity. My friends and I often meet in coffee shops, and we're willing to pay for quality depending on where we end up. Now, before we move on to our next speaker, I've been told that Mustafa wants to say just a few words. Mustafa Zafari. You have to unmute yourself, Mustafa. Alex, can you unmute Mustafa?
No,
There
I
we
can't.
go.
Hello,
Okay.
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, thank you for the time you provided me. I realized I'm the one who participated in this talk, and I realized that there had been a problem with the subtitles. So I would like just to very briefly tell the entire concept of it. We started this project from a Sam Cafe in Tehran, and I would like to say that when Hassan Malikpour designed Sam Cafe, Tehran did not have many cafes at all. It had very, very few cafes, maybe under 100. But right now, today that we're speaking to you, it has over 6,000 cafes, and thus it's one of the cities that has most number of cafes in the world, both in absolute terms and in relative terms, which means that it is a city which promotes dialogue between citizens in a friendly environment, an environment which is suitable for that. Now, Hassan Malikpour played a very important role in designing that cafe in such a way that would promote dialogue. Now, the other question that I asked him was that he has designed a lot of projects, but what is the issue that he always talks about quality? And Hassan explained to me that our world today is a world that is focused on quantity, the bigger, the larger, the taller, and Hassan wants to make something which has more quality. I asked him, is this quality something which is repeatable, something that can be transformed into a sort of routine? And Hassan says that at this time, this is not what he is concerned with. He just wants to introduce it at this moment. Later on, I asked him whether he is an architect of space or the architect of life, because as in the beginning of the session, I said, I have dedicated my career into creating, into enhancing the quality of everyday life. And I think everyday life matters more than space, but Hassan has a different idea. He says space matters more. Quality of life comes later on. Then I told Hassan that I asked him, do you like cities? And he told me he likes cities, but as you see in the video, he hesitates a little bit and he speaks a lot. He speaks that his house is outside of the city. And I told him, no, do you love the cities? Because if someone wants to change the city, someone must love it. And Hassan told me that he loves all live creatures and the city is a live creature. Now I referred to Hassan's Instagram page, which is an interesting project. And in it, he has two images, one of Central Park, New York, which just shows the vibrations of the water in the lake, and the other one is in the city of Tabriz. He just shows the horizon. And I told him, why do you so zoom in such projects that you miss out the bigger picture? Because Central Park, New York is much larger than Central Park, and Tabriz is much larger than just the horizon. And he says that he wants to pinpoint to that quality, and for architecture to behave differently, it has to focus on quality. And at the end, I told him that this is your opportunity to speak to the UN Habitat managers, perhaps even the executive director might be listening to this. Don't recommend something to them, ask them something. And Hassan was saying that please have more focus on architecture, and architecture has to reinvent itself, and UN Habitat has to give more and more opportunity to architecture. So I tried to wrap it up very quickly, but I think this was a very interesting hard talk with one of the influential architects in Iran, and I hope these kind of hard talks could continue. Thank you for giving me this time.
Well, thank you very much for the insights, Mr. Zafari.
John, just one word. I want to add one word. Based on our perspective, we are trying to recognize urban resources, and we have to take care about all the elements of the space. We need to be very keen about the details of everything that we have to avoid misunderstanding about treasure, our resources. That is our approach on the pavilion, to bring and rethink about our style, how we were able to use the quality of a space as urban resources. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Reza. And thank you everyone for your patience. And especially I want to thank our next speaker, Jyoti Hausagrahar, for your patience and sticking with us. I'm looking forward to your talk. As you probably picked up, I try to notice and make note of some sort of personal connection with each of the speakers. And the best I can come up with as a personal connection with you is that I had a roommate when I was an undergraduate about 100 years ago who worked for UNESCO. How about that? So there's a bit of a personal connection. Jyoti Hausagrahar is the Deputy Director of the World Heritage Center at UNESCO and leads a number of implementation programs there. Before that, and before joining UNESCO, she was a professor and director of the SUI lab at GSAP in Columbia University. And before that, she was UNESCO Chair in Culture, Habitat, and Sustainability Development at Srishti University of Art, Design, and Technology in Bangalore, India, where she was also the chair of the PhD program. Jyoti?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear experts, I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to try to bring up my my slide presentation. So if you will allow me a second, I have to do that. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So what we're witnessing is the largest human migration in history, essentially, with more than half of the world's population living in urban areas with rapid and uncontrolled urbanization, and that frequently results in social and spatial fragmentation and in a drastic deterioration of the quality of urban and rural environments. Historic cities and traditional settlements have often developed resilient features that contribute toward the adapting to challenges like climate change, including by controlling carbon emissions and mitigating its impacts on communities and the built fabric. The role of urban heritage in promoting sustainable development in cities was explicitly outlined in the 2011 UNESCO recommendation on the historic urban landscape. It said there, urban heritage, including its tangible and intangible components, constitutes a key resource in enhancing the livability of urban areas and fosters economic development and social cohesion in a changing global environment. As the future of humanity hinges on the effective planning and management of resources, conservation has become a strategy to achieve a balance between urban growth and the quality of life on a sustainable basis. So this recommendation is really important and I think relevant here because it is a recommendation that was adopted by the General Conference of UNESCO, which is to say 195 countries adopted it, and it is being monitored and the implementation is being monitored regularly. The recommendation on the historic urban landscape was adopted by the 36th General Conference, and the approach, the whole approach, as we call it, historic urban landscape approach, to managing historic urban areas is holistic by integrating the goals of urban heritage conservation with those of social and economic development. This method sees urban heritage as a social, cultural, and economic resource for the development of cities. It is an additional tool to integrate policies and practices of conservation of the built environment into the wider goals of urban development with respect to inherited environment and with respect to inherited values and traditions of different cultural contexts. So in a sense, it is a soft law. So unlike a convention, for example, which is obligatory once a country has ratified it, a recommendation is what we call a soft law, and that countries adopted it, and they are, and we advise them on how to implement it, and countries about implementing it. So it's a soft law to be implemented by member states on a voluntary basis. It applies to all historic cities and not only the World Heritage cities. The recommendation on the historic urban landscape defines the historic urban landscape in the urban area as a result of historic layering of cultural and natural values and attributes, extending beyond the notion of a historic center or ensemble to include the broader urban context and its geographic setting. This wider context includes notably the site's topography, geomorphology, hydrology, natural features, its built environment, historic and contemporary, its infrastructure, below ground, above ground, its open spaces, parks, its land use patterns, its spatial organization, perceptions, visual relationships, and all the other elements of the urban structure. It also includes social and cultural practices and values, economic processes, and the intangible dimensions of heritage as related to diversity and identity. So what is the whole approach? It's based on the recognition and identification, as I said, of layering and interconnections, and specifically interconnections between the natural and cultural, tangible and intangible, international and local values present in any city. And these values would be taken as an entry point or a point of departure in the overall management of the city. And that's why we were showing you some of these images, because when you're looking, you're not just looking at the city as a big monument, you're looking at the historic center as a place where there's meaning and there's a connection. So the royal palaces of the Aboni in Africa, the Medina of Essaouira in Morocco, the Bonnier, the Cinque Terre, the islands of Jumeirah, Tino, and Tineto in Italy. As you can see, the relationship to water, the morphology, all of those things are significant. So when we look at learning from HUL, the idea of reading these multiple layers, both in terms of synchronic layers and diachronic layers, are very significant. So when I say synchronic and diachronic layers, I'm talking about the layering over a period of time when you've had many different rulers and reigns that have modified the landscape in various ways, or built, layers of new structures that have come up. But also layers in terms of, the intangible and the tangible, and the symbolic, the social, the physical, all of these one look at in terms of layers, and being able to read and identify all of these different layers. So this idea of approaching the construction of a city as a constitution of these different layers and their interactions is a critical approach. So this shifts really from a monument-centric approach to the urban fabric as a whole, and recognizes the local specificity of an urban fabric, the local attributes, and considers the city as a process that's constantly changing and evolving. And so it's looking both at the management of change and at stability in time. This management of change is really significant, especially for the livability of a city, as well as for the identity and the continuities, because that's where the heritage values are. It's not that you hang on to every single old building. Obviously, there's certain things that you have to let go, and certain things that must be very carefully protected. And that making those decisions has to happen in a very deliberate way from the beginning, so that that's part of the main planning processes, so that needs to be what is really important to retain is then retained and passed on over time. So that's what we call managing change in the city. So being able to identify in this way the diachrony and synchrony of the architectural type is very critical. So the way we see it, the history of a city is inscribed in its urban form. And so you want to be able to really read that history, whatever change you're managing, that history should still be readable in the city, because that history is the identity of the place. I want to share with you some examples. Here you're really looking also at, for example, the historic center of Salvador de Bahia in Brazil, where you have an 18th century city with a Portuguese influence and a very large population of Afro-Brazilian population and their heritage. So being able to sort of arrive at these multiple layers of tangible and intangible heritage is very critical. So the social dimensions of the city and the intangible layer as expressions of identity are very critical in the way the places are managed, planning and management structures, here as intangible value, and how they're associated to the planning and management processes. I want to take a little bit more of a deeper example here and looking at how this kind of the HUL or whole approach, the historic urban landscape approach, was applied in the historic center of Naples in Italy. Naples, of course, is a major historic town and a commercial city in the Mediterranean region. The historic center of Naples was inscribed in the World Heritage List in 1995. And the different layers of Naples' long and eventful history are preserved in contemporary urban fabric, including the rectangular grid layout of ancient Greek foundation. So it turned out that in 2011, there was a plan to create a new management plan for the historic center. And this was an opportunity, of course, to implement the recommendation on the historic urban landscape. One of the main goals in approaching the management strategies for Naples was to understand the relationship of the city with its environment and addressing the issues affecting the historical center at large scale. So it could be local, metropolitan, provincial, regional, and all these different scales are very critical. So when you see the city of Naples, one of the things that emerged from this was, and in case you don't know, I can clarify that the way World Heritage works is that, you have an area of the property that's inscribed as the property boundary, and then there is a protective layer that we call a cushion, that is the buffer zone, that is around it. And when it's a city, you would imagine that the property would automatically coincide with the property, the boundary of the city, and the buffer zone would be outside. But it isn't really how it works, because the property boundaries are really inscribed based on the attributes that are very carefully studied, and only those areas are included which really tell that one story, that is the criteria for which it's inscribed. And the buffer zone is an area that is a protective area. So these areas then become the more regulated areas. And actually what you find very interesting is that while you might imagine that most cities are trying to have as small of a buffer zone as possible, in fact, Naples actually expanded its buffer zone. And this is true for other cities as well, that we can tell you, because it makes the management of the heritage values much easier, more meaningful, and that actually this sort of integrated planning can be undertaken in such a way that the different areas, the relationship between the region and the city are very carefully then demonstrated. The management plan attempted to combine the efforts of preservation of the extremely of various historical built heritage with intangible heritage, which is as rich as the physical one. In fact, the historic city center of Naples is unique due to the extraordinary presence of different layers and density and diversity of cultural expressions and its social vitality, factors that qualify this place as real living heritage. So in gastronomy, including pizza making, handicrafts, the nativity scene art, the local creative industries which present vital, authentic expressions of the system of cultural values in the historic city, were interpreted as opportunities for generating cultural and economic value. The approach to safeguarding tangible and intangible cultural heritage was focused on ensuring continuous production of new culture, because you're not seeing tangible heritage, it's static is the point. I want to end with two things. First, I want to show some of the resources and some of the other materials that we have been worked towards that might be useful for the participants in general of this meeting and for the pavilion going forward, and also to reflect a little bit on why this approach and this way of thinking, this relationship to heritage is critical in thinking about cities in the current situation of the pandemic. So the Culture Urban Future publication was the first global report on culture for sustainable urban development, which recognized really and explored the role of culture for sustainable urban development. This was published for the Habitat 3, it was published in 2016 and launched at the Habitat 3, and offers a policy framework to support governments in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The report analyzes the situation, trends, threats, and existing opportunities in different regional contexts and presents a global picture of urban heritage, safeguarding, conservation, and management, as well as the promotion of cultural and creative industries as resources for sustainable urban development. Managing urban world heritage, a significant number of local governments are directly involved in managing such properties. We have the World Heritage Cities program, for instance, at the World Heritage Center has more than 313 cities that arrived on the World Heritage list that are actually urban areas. And I'm not talking about a monument in an urban area because we have many more of those, but this is really urban heritage that we're talking about. Another resource that I want to draw your attention to is the thematic indicators for culture in the 2030 agenda, the Culture 2030 indicators. This was launched on the November of 2019 at the Forum of the Ministers of Culture in the presence of more than 120 ministers of culture. And what this does is really, it's a 2-year effort to develop indicators across to really measure the transversal role of culture, measuring across all the 17 goals and 169 targets, but really identifying 24 targets where we see culture contributing more directly, and then developing alternative indicators, because culture cannot be measured through statistical indicators. So to develop both quantitative and qualitative indicators of a variety of different types that have been then put together here with a methodology. And you can find this on our website, the World Heritage Center website. So I want to leave you with these other initiatives and publications that you can see the links for that would invite you also to look at the website of the World Heritage Cities program, which is one of the 6 thematic programs formally approved and monitored by the World Heritage Committee, where we have now been putting out monthly journal. We have the City Lab activity, which is a way of collaboratively developing solutions that is not assuming that there is one solution out there, really trying to see it as a co-learning, co-creation environment for finding solutions to urban issues in historic urban areas. And to finally just draw back your attention to the issue which we're all confronting with the current pandemic. One of the things that in working with all of our historic cities that we see is the importance of thinking locally again. And this is really, really important when we are talking about heritage and historic cities, because that was their strength, is their local uniqueness, their local resources. So being able to recognize your local resources and being able to revive many of the traditional building technologies or even the ways of building and constructing that were often respectful of the climate and the topography would be responses that are green responses that could provide jobs. Furthermore, many of these historic cities have been, as very clearly demonstrated here, very important for the associated intangible heritage. So the other practices that are with it can provide also other opportunities for employment. So the idea that, and because they're often compact cities, which are walkable, they become all green from the transportation perspective. So the idea that these cities become actually places where people can live together as a community, really valuing their local attributes, recognizing and valuing it, and not simply seeing it as a kind of golden hand for tourism, is, I think, this is a perfect time to do that, and would offer solutions to cities big and small. So with that, I want to thank you very much and wish you an excellent conference. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing. And there we are.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hasagrahar. The concept of layering in culture and history is really important. The land where the University of Western Ontario exists was fought over by numerous Indian tribes, the Iroquois, the Mohawks, the Chippewa, the Neutrals, the Hurons, and no one acknowledges any of those other layers. All they do is acknowledge the last one, the Chippewa. And nobody acknowledges that the Chippewa sold that land to the British settlers, who then sold it. And the last owner before the University of Western Ontario was the London Hunt and Country Club. Nobody ever mentions that as one of the layers. All of these layers are very important. Thank you again. And once again, I want to thank everyone for your kind attention. And I want to thank all of the speakers this morning in the first set of keynote addresses. I look forward to speaking with you later this afternoon in my own presentation, where I'll be talking about fiscal sustainability. And now I'll turn it back over to Alex.
Thank you, John, and thank you for curating that session. John Palmer has been a huge help to Urban Economy Forum over the last year with providing his various expertise and knowledge in our numerous projects. Next, we have our second keynote series session, and Jason Gignerum will be curating the session. Jason is the Associate Regional Director of Admissions of Central Canada at CDI College, and he is also a member of the UEF Steering Committee. Jason, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. I'm assuming you all can hear me, so I want to apologize up front if I pronounce anyone's names wrong, but I just want to do a quick overview of some topics that obviously the keynote speakers will probably go more in depth with. So I just want to chat a little bit about SDGs and our current situation. So, in the last 15 years of global efforts to improve people's lives everywhere through the achievement of, the 17 SDGs that were outlined to be met by 2030 was already sort of off track in 2019. And now with a short period, COVID-19 hit us with this unleashed, I guess, precedented crisis, causing further disruption to this process. So, approximately 71 million are going to be expected to be pushed back into extreme poverty by 2020. The first rise in global poverty since the 90s, I would say. Lost incomes, limited social protection, and rising prices mean that those who are previously secure could find themselves at risk of poverty or even hunger, some of the basic human needs. So some aspects can be underemployment, unemployment, over 1.6 billion who are already vulnerable through this informal economy. Half of our global workforce will be affected with incomes, and 60% of them within the first month, as a lot of you can see in your respective areas of expertise and around the world. More than 1 billion of slum dwellers worldwide are acutely at risk, as a result of COVID-19, suffering from, as we heard, adequate housing, running water to homes, shared toilets, or even just limited transportation or healthcare facilities. If we can, go to women and children now, bearing the heaviest brunt of the pandemic's effects, disruption in health, vaccination, the additional deaths of under fives, has spiked. Additional maternal deaths in 2020 that are recorded as a result. Many of countries around the world have seen this surge. Reports in domestic violence against women and children. If we can go to schools, over 90% of students worldwide are out of school, caused by over 370 million children that are missing out on meals as a result because of these plans and subsidies by these schools that are now closed. Lack of access to computers, internet, remote learning, is a luxury for a lot of people around the world that we don't take into account as well. As far, when it comes to families, they're falling in extreme poverty as well. Children in poor, disadvantaged communities are much more prone to child labor, child marriage, trafficking. In fact, the global gains of reducing child labor has been reversed in the first time in 20 years. So, that's just a small little summarization of sort of, some of the things and topics that our keynote speakers will be speaking in this session. So on that, I would like to introduce Angelika Poth Motkale. Angelika is the Executive Director of the European Affairs at the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. Angelika has been part of that experience for over 25 years, representing interests of local and regional governments within the EU. So, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. And I think my intervention comes quite to the point that you were just referring to, because I want to focus on the financial and economic impact of COVID. But first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to this second forum. I really enjoyed last year to be able to join you in Toronto, and in particular also to visit the project in Regent Park. And I'm pleased to hear, or probably to get more information at this second forum today and tomorrow. Even so, unfortunately, due to the time difference, I have to apologize that I cannot stay for the whole rest of today and tomorrow. Just from our organization, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, it's the umbrella organization of 60 national associations from 40 countries representing local and regional government in Europe. We have, together with our world organization, United Cities and Local Government, really dedicated our ambition to the achievement of the SDGs. And last year we developed, and it's about to be adopted by our statutory bodies, we developed a multi-annual strategy that goes until 2030, where we really align all our activities to the SDGs. So really to commit ourselves to make the SDGs a reality in Europe. Last week, we had our annual retreat at CMR, which is a 2-day series of events and sessions, and it was dedicated in particular to the recovery from the COVID, even so we are not yet there, but at the same time highlighting that the achievement of the SDG still remains our priority, and the objective is really to combine the two. As you all know, the coronavirus has had a major impact on the economic and financial situation of municipalities, cities, and regions. And we at CMR, we have established a task force in April this year, which is composed of representatives of 34 of our member associations. So this shows the huge interest in this topic. And like all our activities, the two main objectives are, on the one hand, to share knowledge, share experience, share information, and on the other hand, of course, also to coordinate advocacy work towards the national and, in our case, of course, also the European level. So we launched at a very early stage a survey among our members to find out what is the impact of COVID on the economic and financial situation. And we had answers from 21 associations from 17 countries. And as it's definitely no surprise to you, the outcome was, of course, that local and regional governments had to face significant increases in expenditures, mainly by buying protective equipment for the population and for local public service staff, health and secure care, social care professionals. Many also provided additional social support by, for example, delivery of meals, food, or medicine for more vulnerable inhabitants, financial support to populations most impacted by job losses, accommodations for health professionals, homeless and/or refugees, etc. Adding to this, of course, other costs incurred by new safety measures to ensure physical distancing, additional health protocols, new investments for teleworking, etc. In parallel, the revenues of local and regional governments fell, mostly due to the decrease of tax incomes. Closing of shops and businesses had a major impact on local and regional business taxes in many countries. The taxes also dropped due to more vulnerable situations of the population, like unemployment or shift from full-time to part-time occupation. There were decreases in fees for municipal services, like, for example, car parks, room renting, kindergartens, cultural activities, etc. And finally, of course, also the drop in tourism activities had direct consequences on many municipal and regional benefits. Just to give you a few figures to show the impact, in Austria, for example, the municipal level expects costs up to 2 billion additional euros in 2020 because of additional spending needs. And at the same time, the income is expected to decrease by 10% at local level. And in additional, that's how the local governments are financed in Austria, a decrease by 10 to 12% from the federal taxes. In Germany, they just published recent figures. Municipalities closed the first half of this year with a funding deficit of 9.7 billion euros. And in England, the financial pressure of this year and next year is expected to amount between 3 to 4 times the 3.5 billion that has been allocated by government so far. So we have collected all this information, and we have published an analysis of the situation as it was assessed mid of this year. And also, it's still too early to obtain definite estimates of the impact of COVID-19 crisis on local and regional governments' finances. The findings clearly outline a worrying picture. In many countries, the situation is critical, and support from central or regional governments, and possibly for those who are concerned, also from the European Union, will be absolutely vital for the continuation of public services at local and regional level. Our survey's results suggest the different ways of local and regional governments are financed throughout Europe, like, for example, the share of own resources as opposed to state allocations. And this obviously will lead to different impacts on subnational governments' finances. We fear that after the 2009 financial crisis, local and regional governments will need time to recover financially, and we expect a significant reduction in local and regional investments in the coming years, in a context where some countries already suffer from an investment gap of the past years. The situation is very problematic, as these investments are really needed to meet the objectives in terms of sustainable development, and all our local governments are really committed to achieve the SDGs. And as we have heard before, local governments are also a key factor for job recovery. Certainty on sufficient funding and liquidity is vital to ensure that local and regional governments can successfully deliver the best possible response to COVID-19. Most of the local government associations are in dialogue with their national government to inform them on estimated costs and losses at local and regional level, and to find possible support measures to compensate both losses of revenues and increase of expenses. Support schemes will be best set in place. Some governments are increasing their financial allocation to local and regional governments. Others accepted to take in charge part of the additional expenses from local and regional governments by, for example, purchasing equipment. Associations are also developing tools to help local and regional governments understand the impact of COVID-19 on subnational finances and to find ways out of the crisis. So the way out of the crisis. The key to successfully combating the economic and financial impact of COVID-19 is to tailor actions at every government level. As it was highlighted in the OECD report on the territorial impact of COVID-19, published and updated in June this year, local and regional governments play a key role in tackling the socio-economic challenges, and therefore cooperation of all levels of government and the participation of subnational government in the national recovery plans are necessary. As you probably know, in Europe, in the European Union, the European Commission proposed a recovery instrument. It's called New Generation EU, worth 750 billion euros. The new Recovery and Resilience Facility will distribute 560 billion euros through both grants and loans. It will support investments and reforms essential to a sustainable recovery, including in relation to the green and digital transitions and the resilience of national economies, linking these to the European Union political priorities. Now, the central governments are preparing their tailored national recovery plans, and the central question, of course, for us is whether they involve local governments in this process. In parallel, there are the negotiations between the European Parliament and the Council, where the governments are represented about the package. And in order to ensure that the program can start early in 2021, a decision is necessary still this month, October, and the approval of 41 parliaments, national parliaments, and some regional parliaments as well. For us, it is extremely important that the recovery plans will serve to build sustainable and resilient societies, to boost innovation and modernize the economy. They will be valuable instruments to achieve the sustainable development goals of the 2030 agenda, notably at local and regional level. And I'm quite pleased to say that in the European Union, there's almost consensus that really the money should be served for these objectives. But we still need to see how the negotiations will go in the next weeks. But we are quite optimistic, and we hope that this will be the case. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you very much. And we're looking forward to those plans, and hopefully that'll obviously complement the SDGs along with sustainability, and maybe be a great pathway for other countries and or areas, whether it be micro or macro, to follow suit and use those as best practices. So thank you very much for all that information. So on that note, we'll pass it on to Raphael Toots. Raphael is the Director of Global Solutions Division at the UN Habitat in Nairobi. His assignments with the UN focuses on promoting compact, integrated, and connected cities that are inclusive and resilient to climate change. Raphael has assisted with coordinating UN Habitat's engagement in formulating the Sustainable Development Goals, including SDG 11. On that note, Raphael, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jason, and also thanks to the organizers of the Urban Economy Forum for inviting UN Habitat to engage strongly with the forum. I'm very happy to be part of this. And today it's my pleasure to share some thoughts about around the occasion of World Habitat Day 2020 on housing for all, particularly on the normative foundation of this call, Housing for All, as well as its operational implications. So let me start with some of the foundations of this topic. And it's fitting that this is happening as the United Nations celebrates its 75th anniversary, because the mandate of Housing for All is quite old. In fact, it was adopted during the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, when adequate housing was recognized as a development issue. So it's really 70 plus years with us. So it's not a new topic. It keeps on coming back stronger and stronger. Many speakers have spoken about the 2030 agenda, where this mandate has even been strengthened and more concretized with a concrete target by 2030 to ensure access for all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing and basic services, and upgrade slums. So in this regard, it adds an element to the outstanding business of upgrading slums. It addresses the adequate, safe, and affordable housing, which is a new mandate in the United Nations development discourse, because in the MDGs was only talk about upgrading slums. So the adequate and affordable are new elements to the mandate. And then in 2016, obviously, with the new urban agenda, there was an even stronger support to housing, equal access to adequate and affordable housing, recognizing that housing is an effective equalizer for shared prosperity and growth and to end poverty. So there's some new dimensions with each time the mandate is strengthened, some new dimensions are being emphasized. In 2017, the Governing Council of UN Habitat adopted the approach Housing at the Center. And Housing at the Center provides guiding principles and a holistic framework for housing policies and strategies. So it makes the whole discussion one step more concrete. And it has two specific recommendations: that at the national level, housing policy should be integrated in national urban policy, and at the local level, the importance of housing for urban planning and for designing integrated and inclusive societies is emphasized. So this duality of national and local emphasis to emphasis housing at the center of cities, housing at the center of communities, housing at the center of the focus of urban planning. So this is in terms of the mandates. Now, how to operationalize that? Generally, what governments would do, both local and national governments is looking at what is the economic and social vectors that are helping housing to become a driver for prosperous societies and communities. So looking at industry development, employment generation, because every house built creates about 5 jobs, taxes obviously, but also the social dimension, the location of housing, impact on better health, education, and increased opportunities for people that are receiving better types of or more adequate housing. Now, despite all these efforts over the past decennia, according to the latest data that we collected with Lincoln Institute for Land Policy and New York University, around 80% of the cities worldwide do not have affordable housing options for half of their population. So this is quite a striking statistics. Now, 80% of the cities worldwide do not have affordable housing for half of their population. And this is now, as many speakers have said, being exacerbated by COVID-19, which is, increasing inequalities, and housing becomes even a matter of life and death, simply said. There is also some positive news, I think, with COVID-19, because there is an increasing understanding that housing is not just a commodity, that housing is a fundamental right to ensure a safe place to live in peace and in dignity. And the response to COVID-19 also shows that housing is a right that can actually be realized when there is a political agenda for collaboration between different stakeholders. Because indeed, we emphasize a lot the responsibilities of governments, both national and local governments, but especially the private sector is hugely important in the sector of housing. Private developers, construction firms, professional organizations, financial institutions are fundamental to achieve this. Architects, for instance, are fundamental to achieve this, to develop a bigger proportion of affordable housing option. And it has been so in history that the private sector can help to realize this search for affordable and adequate housing. I just want to give one example before I close. And this is fitting today, because today, together with the government of Egypt, we are launching the creation of the Egyptian housing strategy. It is with the Ministry of Housing, Utilities and Urban Communities that this strategy has been developed. And again, it has a very critical role for the real estate and the private sector in the delivery of housing, and focusing also on the regulatory framework that will help the real estate to also be able to bring housing affordability to low-income housing groups. So this is done by making the work of the mortgage finance fund more flexible, and in terms of the rules for social housing, the subsidies, and the standards that are being set. So this is a concrete intervention through a strategy at the national level for a large country like Egypt, to allow housing to become more affordable, including intervening in the land and in the construction costs that are related to housing. So I'll leave it here just with a call for everyone. As you know, this is not just a one-day World Habitat Day. This is a campaign for 5 weeks to raise awareness and commit to housing for all. So I would really call upon everyone to share solutions, to promote alliances and initiatives, and inviting you all to participate in this shared effort on housing for all. So thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Raphael. And it resonates when you speak from the economic input of housing and sustainability and affordability, when it correlates to the moral aspect of humanity as well. So I think that the more that we can bridge that gap, hopefully we can see movement to this ongoing issue. And like you said, it's not something of yesterday, and it's not something for the next 5 or 10 years, but it is a way of life. So on that same note, I would like to move on to Umar Cilia. Since January of 2020, Umar has been an acting director for the Regional Office of Africa in the United Nations Human Settlements Program. In his long career with the UN Habitat, he has continuously supported the urban policy and development, sustainable urbanization for Francophone countries predominantly. So on that note, Umar, the floor is yours, and I can't wait to hear your comments and your
thank you very much. I don't know, you're seeing my screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the organizers of this Urban Economic Forum. So I'm going to bring this African perspective, of course, as director of the Regional for Africa. So if you know that, yes, Africa has not been hit, by the level of casualties that we can see in other countries and continents. But economically and socially and environmentally, I think there's a lot of damage that we can, stress out, out of this pandemic. And everybody's busy now looking into recovery process. But when it comes to recovery process, there's some dimension we always forget to talk about it, especially when it comes to Africa. I think it's a taboo sometimes because of the complexity of this business, which is about land. So we heard from Rafto's presentation, the housing dimension, and this cannot be achieved if you do not address the land issues. But also we talk about all this informal settlement that were prevailing in Africa and exposed to the high rise, infection of the disease. So it means that, land as such is the core, of this discussion of recovery, and also in terms of looking into revenue generation as well, how we can leverage, these untapped resources related to land-based financing. It is very important to have this really holistic approach of the recovery process. And when we talk about value chain of housing or value chain related to, taxation system, there's some ingredient we need to look at in the context of Africa, especially, in this rapid urbanization. So recently, UN Habitat and United Nations Economic Commission has produced a report, to look at, the impact of COVID-19 in cities in Africa. And there was quite a number of consideration, policy consideration, but also program consideration that give us, a way of looking into integrated approach of this issue of recovery from COVID-19. So some figures, as you may see it, rapid urbanization in Africa, that's a fact that nobody can deny anymore, this current context. Of course, Africa is least, urbanized country, but the rapid urbanizing now in this current rate. It's not about talking, big cities, but also looking into small intermediate cities. The number of cities, from 300,000 people to 1 million are growing. At the same time, they are facing, a lot of challenges in terms of planning and management, in terms of capacity, to name those. As you may see it, I think everybody knows the number we are talking about. Today, we are talking about 600 million people living in cities in Africa, still moving forward. But also another challenge is about the prevalences of slum and informal settlement. Only for sub-Saharan Africa, we have 48% of urban population living in informal settlement without adequate housing, without access to basic services, without access to sanitation, but also without access to tenant security, which is a fundamental right, as mentioned by Rafto during his previous presentation. But at the same time, that's a key ingredient in the center of slum regulation or upgrading if you want really to improve people's life in the slums. So what is the consequences of this pandemic in the African economy, especially in cities? Of course, you see this growth has shrunk now. I mean, before 2 months or 3 months ago, people was a bit, optimistical and talking about even 5%. And now we realize that some countries are going even down minus. Senegal, for example, they are talking about minus in terms of, growth, for this years and next years coming to come. But also the urban economic contraction will directly reduce municipal revenue, which in turn can lead to less financial resources to deliver urban services. I think my colleague from European Union has talked about, the support given to local government and some regional government to leverage more resources to fulfill, the need for citizens in terms of access to basic services, which is an issue in Africa cities as well. Urban fiscally, I think that's some issues as well. Of course, is there no transaction? I mean, we have been talking about a package or stimulator package to cities because we know that there's a deficit for local government and national government at the same time, especially in the context of devolution, where if you want, this local government have been relied on the national government to be transferred resources. If there's no resources, how this can be done in terms of perequation? And today we are talking about even up to 30% under the best case scenario for this reduction of this fiscal blanket. Another point as well, capital investment, of course. I think this report has highlighted a city with less than 200,000 inhabitants are most impacted in terms of capital for investment. So all financial resources are used for the operation and public services, and not much remaining for for investment. And that's something to consider as well, how we can unlock the potential. And that is why this conversation or using land as a driver, as a vector, of catalyzing innovation in terms of leveraging taxation system, but also in terms of fixing the economy is very important. But nevertheless, I think there's a lot of challenges when it comes to land in Africa, especially in cities. So right now we have growing secondary cities, as I mentioned it earlier, but at the same time, they lack capacity on various levels. And one key of this level is about land administration and land information system. If you look at the statistic in Africa, I think we are talking about 70% of land which is out of the registration system of the cadastre. It means that this land, in terms of taxation or in terms of investment, are not productive and creating a lot of conflict. Even if you look at what happened in many countries right now, there's a lot of conflict related to land because you have the this confrontation between statutory and customary system, which is huge as well, hindrance to investment, but also to generating local revenue based on land. Land use planning, all these tools we mentioned sometimes are not necessarily anchored within the municipal services, and sometimes they do not have those support that help them take the decision in terms of allocation of land, in terms of increased revenue, which is a call upon a need for integrated territorial planning. Another element as well, challenge we are facing, especially where I'm sitting in Kenya, which is a huge, challenges, the regulation of the land market. Nairobi is increasing, is expanding, but as we have an uncontrolled land market, which is dominated by speculator and based on willing buyers and willing sellers. At the end of the day, who is losing is the government is losing because there's no control on those transactions. And this has impact on the prices of housing, which is higher up in some time. Today, okay, we have this crisis, which is bringing down a bit the price of rent and the price of land, but we don't know when this regime, the economic activity will resume, how much, this speculation will rise again. So right now we are working with the European Union on some approaches on, on putting in place some mechanism at least to control, this land market system by putting in place maybe a very digital system. They can help you track, different transactions at the same time, different trends based on index system. So we have been working for, some things that we realized in Kisumu County, as I mentioned it, the missing opportunity for not being able to tap on land resources. So we see that only 6% are being collected, and so municipalities or the county is mainly focusing on non-structured revenue like parking fees and others, while we have a huge potential on the land sector. But there's some reason why they couldn't tap on it, because I think the capacity and the policy level as well is very important. So these are some challenges I already mentioned. Based on this issue, I already picked out from Kisumu. So we have weak data management. Of course, if you don't have a land registry, which is working well, you don't have land information system, it will be very difficult, to track, the trend of land transaction at the same time being able to generate taxation system. And the social aspect, the sensitization issues, the philosophy and the belief of people on this taxation system, if they do not get in return, investment from their local government, sometimes it's very difficult to convince them to really contribute on that. So sanction, a lack of sanction, legislation as well, policies, those are some hindrance, to generating this land taxation system to be able to fulfill the need for service delivery at the municipality level. But of course, we can see a lot of opportunity, because if you manage really to have a response to these challenges related to land governance, land information system, but also to tracing all these transactions related to land, of course, there's potential, because right now we are talking in Africa, secondary cities, a market of millions of people right now, and they need housing, they need infrastructure, they need road, and they need as well to invest, and all are related to the land market. That's the reason why this opportunity has to be harvested. But for that to be happen, we need to look at the policy level, we need to look at the technical level, we need to look at the social dimension level in the context of African cities. So some experience that UN Habitat has been doing, I mean, we have been working on ounces revenue, for example, for Kiambu County. I mentioned in the previous slide, our work with the county of Kisumu as well, and Kiambu, our intervention has helped, if you want, the county to raise a bit taxation system. So the problem at the beginning was low property taxation, as we see it, and there was no mechanism of receipt for public, public expenditure and others. So our intervention consists in rezoning for property tax, digitalization of the tax process, but also establish of audit mechanism to really enforce accountability. And the result we saw can see this, increase from 12 million to 24 million revenue collection in 2 years' time windows, which was quite impressive, and the process still going on. And UN Habitat is in the process scaling up all this own source revenue based on land taxation in many counties, but also in others country. And more specific example I want to share with you, which is a context of post-conflict or conflict, even we can say, which is Somaliland, where UN Habitat is supporting as well local government to harness, if you want, the value of land through land taxation system, but also by enforcing a very light and fit for purpose land information and cadastral index from which they can really harness or get more taxation system in place. And you can see it, revenue has increased, dramatically, in this particular context, with some, enforcement of accountability, transparency, but also building capacity. We can see that in 2018 there was quite, from 1 million to 9 million, increase in terms of taxation. So where we are now in Somalia, we are linking this taxation system with light digitalization system, and which allow as well private sector and investor to really, have a good tracing of the transactions they are doing. They are paying taxes. So you can see some example here, and how this digitalization has contributed as well to increasing, some taxation from the business, business people. So which is a good example that being replicated. And this money has been used as well to fund or to support many basic services in the district, of Somaliland. For example, you can see in terms of public school, health, and other services, which has been really supported by this land taxation generated. So I just want to finish my slide by showing you the perspective of African office. So based on this discussion going on, we believe that looking into good governance and national urban policy, I think this question has been brought many times in the discussion, is key, for example, in looking into, resilient and attractive investment in city, especially in the context of Africa, where we have now many secondary cities growing without, adequate policy or adequate, planning process. So there's really work that needs to be done to unlock, the financial potential, but also deliver affordable housing and infrastructure. And we need to take into consideration also the context of climate change and conflict in Africa, which is hindering as well a lot of effort being made, in the process of revamping, but also of fixing this economy after the COVID-19. Still, land is central to all this question I just mentioned. Again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and congratulations to the team who organized this meeting, and we look forward to continue the collaboration. Over.
All right, thank you very much. It's great to see how you can, you're leveraging land to drive capital revenue, because we all know with that revenue, it'll create urbanization in a sustainable manner to conquer those more human aspects of human rights and SDGs. So it's great to see it in action, and I can't wait to see it spread all over Africa as a result. On that same note, I will like to turn it on to Vincent Tong. Sorry, Vincent is the Chief Development Officer of Toronto Community Housing. He has been the lead for 3 revitalization projects and is currently responsible for the oversight of Toronto Community Housing's real estate and development program. So Vincent, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Great, thank you, Jason. There we go. I was muted there for a second. It is my privilege to join you today to provide remarks at this year's Urban Economy Forum. The theme, Housing for All, a Better Urban Future, could not be more fitting for an organization such as Toronto Community Housing, and in my role as Chief Development Officer. It is a theme that I have seen come to life through our community revitalization efforts. Through this virtual online medium, I'd like to paint a picture in your minds of what the Toronto community housing landscape looks like. 110,000 people in Toronto call Toronto Community Housing home across 350 communities. The average income of TCHC households is 18,000 Canadian. We have a large vulnerable population of people who require social supports. Our communities are scattered across the city, and they are a diverse and vibrant blend of individuals, families, and seniors, and of cultures that include newcomers to Canada, as well as those who have been part of our communities for decades. All of this positions us as the largest social housing provider in the country. Through our community revitalization efforts, we have seen the important impact that this development model has on providing people with adequate, safe, and affordable housing, and also how it drives the socioeconomic vibrancy of communities and how that also makes our city better. What began as a way in which TCHC could address the challenges of repairing housing that was falling into a state of disrepair that were, for the most part, built in the 1960s and all aging at the same time. It became evident that through revitalization, we could accomplish so much more. Together with the City of Toronto, residents, neighbors, and private development partners, in 2002, we embarked on our first revitalization project in Donmount Court, which is now called Rivertown. At the core of revitalization is introducing a mix of people, building types, activities, and uses, and a mix of tenures to a community. Real estate is our biggest asset, and we leverage the land and its sale using the profits to partially fund the revitalization of a community. One of the communities that stands as a model of community revitalization is Regent Park, where the Urban Pavilion will be established by UN Habitat. The old Regent Park was Canada's first social housing development. At the end of World War II, this community was densely packed with small, substandard housing and a host of social problems. By the end of the 20th century, although the Regent Park community itself was vibrant, the houses people lived in and the surrounding infrastructure and environment had become inadequate. Despite a number of development efforts to change the community and environment it had been known for, nothing quite took hold until the community approached TCHC to explore revitalization in 1995. By 2003, Toronto City Council had approved the Regent Park revitalization. Through revitalization, we were able to unlock the value of this prime real estate site to leverage investment from the private sector to transform Regent Park into a mixed-use, mixed-income community. Working in partnership with our private development partner, the Daniels Corporation, we have generated profits from the sale of land and private market condominium units. To date, these profits have helped pay for the replacement of 1,263 quality and affordable rent-geared-to-income social housing units. In total, the project will build 2,083 replacement social housing units and an additional 400 affordable units for more than 12,000 people in Regent Park and nearby East Downtown Toronto. Through the revitalization and a people-centered approach to our work, a host of facilities and amenities have been introduced in Regent Park, which are providing jobs, economic opportunities, and social interaction for residents. In other words, breathing life into the community. Prior to COVID, new community facilities and state-of-the-art cultural and sporting venues were packed with community groups and local residents, which, when you think about it, is the most important part of the work we do. It's about the people who live in Regent Park, which goes far beyond simply providing affordable, quality homes. Toronto Community Housing led the process of finding these community solutions, which was initiated by the tenants of TCHC themselves, who saw the need and the opportunity. This work cannot be done alone. Partnerships with residents, the City of Toronto, the private sector, community organizations, and the business community was crucial and remains so today. Together with our partners, we have reimagined Regent Park as a new, vibrant, mixed income and mixed use neighborhood. The City of Toronto's Mayor, John Tory, was recently quoted as saying, "The Regent Park revitalization is a great example of a successful partnership between the city and private sector partners committed to creating more affordable housing. Through this project, our city will see an increase in the supply of affordable housing for families who want to live and work downtown and be part of this vibrant community." Our partnership with the city continues to be a vital component of success. And the project is making a difference for residents. At the completion of the first phase of Regent Park, a social housing and health study led by Dr. Jim Dunn of St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto found that residents who moved directly from old housing to new housing in Regent Park experienced greater satisfaction with their home and with their neighborhood. They also felt safer, more connected to their community, and had improved mental health. Everyone involved is proud of the transformation of Regent Park. The revitalization has made Regent Park a destination in Toronto, where once it was a place people often chose to avoid. The revitalization is also making the community a safer and healthier place to live, a place that people are proud to call home. Developing these kinds of communities are not without risk, and we have learned a great deal through our community revitalization efforts. The first is that revitalization is more than bricks and mortar. It is equally important to invest in tenants themselves. We have strived to provide employment, training, apprenticeship, and education opportunities in every revitalization community to ensure tenants can not only move into new housing, but can benefit positively from economic investment in their community. We have also strived to advance delivery of key community amenities, such as parks, to provide spaces for both formal and informal social gatherings. The second is to adapt, remain flexible, and embrace opportunity. When you're designing a community that is to evolve over 20 plus years, you can't possibly know everything, comprehend every new issue, or know every new opportunity that could transpire as a result of aligning new funding or interest in the community that could emerge in the future. When the opportunity to incorporate state-of-the-art athletic grounds in Regent Park emerged through a partnership with Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment Foundation, TCHC with our partners adapted the master plan to allow this important community amenity to happen. To get things right, it takes time and engagement with the community, municipal government, community, and private partners to establish common objectives and a clear understanding what is important to a community and the people who call it home. Revitalization is an enormous change that creates uncertainty and affects people's ties to their communities. Community engagement is key throughout this process. In Regent Park specifically, we used animators and youth ambassadors to obtain regular input. Regent Park residents supported the process as conduits to facilitate two-way conversations between TCHC and Regent Park residents. Their lived experience helped connect with the most marginalized residents that we may not have been able to connect with otherwise. While we have acquired much knowledge and understanding of community priorities over the past 16 years, community needs continue to evolve, and we are committed to working with local networks to evolve our plans to meet these needs. We have led the revitalization of 12 communities across the City of Toronto, and we currently have 8 active ones today. Each one is unique in its construct and community spirit and has its own story to tell. To make affordable housing possible for all in these communities, one key part of expanding housing options for residents is by working with the City of Toronto and other levels of government to introduce rental units with a range of affordability, so that not only those living in social housing or those living in market condominium buildings are able to be part of these revitalized communities. Although it's important not to glorify these revitalization projects, as we are aware that the stigma of poverty and social housing can manifest in different ways, we do continue to see the benefits of revitalization in each of these communities, the positive impact on all residents, and how it adds to the social fabric of our city. I want to quote Wasim Tahir, who is a resident in the Alexandra Park community, who said, "The best part of revitalization is the way it's united Alexandra Park. I began seeing and meeting new faces. People who weren't really involved in the community before were now taking part, coming out to events, meetings, and committees. It's really helped bond us together." As I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, the theme of the forum, Housing for All, A Better Urban Future, could not be more fitting, a reflection of how we consider our role as a provider of social housing. We are committed to providing quality homes in vibrant communities where people are proud to live and work, and we do so with the aim to contribute to the betterment of society and the future of our city. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Vincent. That's some great information of what Toronto's doing, both from an infrastructure perspective to a social perspective, and obviously it all goes hand in hand to have that ultimate goal of affordable and accessible housing for everyone. So now we'll go to Richard Barkham. Richard is a specialist in macro and real estate economics. He joined CBRE in 2014 as the executive director and global chief economist. He has held numerous positions where he was involved in fund strategy, risk analysis, and capital raising. So on that note, Richard, it's all yours, and I look forward to hearing.
Hey, sorry, Richard, there you go.
There we go. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. And just the normally well-managed city of Boston, where I'm located, is normally very obliging, but the entire highways department has chosen to take today to get after some roadworks. So I apologize if you can hear noise. That's why I've got my headphones on. Let me just say a little bit about my company, CBRE, and I'm delighted to be able to address you today. CBRE is the world's largest property services company, so we're active in brokerage and property management and development. And I'm not trying to make a commercial here, but what I want to just point out is that we have 380 offices worldwide. So it provides me as the chief economist with what I think is a really unique perspective on the forces of economic change that we all have to play with in achieving our policy objectives and our social aspirations. And it's my observation on 40 years in the sector, really, that the pace of change in the urban environment is now, it's more rapid than it has been in my working career. And what I want to do is just play back what I'm seeing coming across my desk. I'll try and do it as colorfully, as quickly as possible. But it seems to me that what I'm seeing and what our clients are telling us are what are the economic forces that you will have to work with over the next 10 years or so. So I probably don't need to tell you, but retail is in a state of flux. And in the United States, and it's happening everywhere, we've got 9,000 announced retail store closures as of September the 16th. Now, many of these will file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and they will come back reinvigorated. But it's a level of churn, it's a level of churn that I haven't seen before. And of course, the reason for that is it's partly COVID, but this pace of internet penetration of retail has been accelerated by COVID. So one of the forces that we'll have to deal with is just that goods are being distributed direct to consumers from this type of asset, ex-urban boxes. Of course, it is also last mile delivery, but it is not going through the traditional streetscape. Now, some people might think the death of the mall is no bad thing, but as somebody who took place in the regeneration of Liverpool city centre, one of Europe's then most depressed cities, and the company I was with at the time anchored that regeneration scheme around retail. What I'm suggesting is this move of retail into the ether, as it were, is going to take a little bit of the economic momentum that we can build regeneration schemes out of the system until we learn to harness and capture that. And you can see this in the statistics we collect. You can just see this is retail completions in the United States versus industrial and logistics completions. just a big divergence taking place in retail. So retail as an engine of urban growth, well, as I say, it's in a state of flux, and more so than I've seen in a long while. But it's really, most people will be aware of that retail transformation. What I really want to talk to now is really the office transformation that is unfolding before our eyes. And why do I focus in on offices? Well, you know, I could take this chart further back, but office using job growth has over the last 20 years driven the urban renaissance that we're all familiar with. So office using jobs have outpaced normal job growth by some considerable margin. This is office based employment in major cities in Europe, and we've got total employment. And it's the tendencies, not just the job growth, it is the tendency over the last 20, 25 years for those jobs to be insanely clustered in downtown areas because of the agglomeration economies that are associated with, firstly, hyperfinance, that wave of office growth, job growth that we had through the finance sector, more latterly through the tech sector. But that combination of job growth and clustering has really been the growth engine of cities globally over the last 25 years. You know, and just by way of example, you will all have, you know, it'd be very difficult to imagine Pudong as coming, you know, as making that transformation if we didn't have that fabulous job growth in the service sector. And in an earlier phase, this is Docklands in the United. 4 cycles, 40 years of growth and maturity, all based around job growth, financial services job growth, and the clustering tendency. But now, you know, as if today wasn't, you know, enough evidence that we can achieve very high levels of informational interchange, that driving factor between urban clustering by having Zoom meetings. And it's not perfect. We'd all rather meet each other, I'm sure, but you can get a lot of business done through Zoom. So maybe the centripetal forces that have been really acting on cities over the last 20 or 30 years are perhaps becoming a little bit more centrifugal. And our clients, this is what I want to tell you. I mean, we talk daily with the top 100 office users around the world. And this is a couple of surveys that we've recently done, June and September. It's not a huge shift. We shouldn't overplay this, but our clients on balance, 60% in them are telling us they are going to be needing more, slightly less office space going forward over the next 10 years. And of course, the reason is that they are rethinking their working models. The service sector, the large companies, the corporations that drive the service sector, this tendency to fluid working, it pre-existed COVID, and it pre-existed the emergence of Zoom technology. But you know, the same way that the COVID crisis has accelerated the internet penetration of retail, so the COVID crisis has accelerated the internet penetration of corporate America or corporate Europe or corporate Asia for that matter. So companies are thinking much more about flexible work practices. So you don't typically go to one downtown office location. You're likely to work from several office locations or increasingly likely to work from several locations. And indeed, some of the time you may well be working at home. And funnily enough, we put this report on responsive real estate out on about February the 10th. It didn't get much coverage in the press because COVID hit. But we were observing these trends prior to COVID, but COVID has certainly accelerated them. So let me just look. This is just to give you some sense of it. This is what we thought in 2019. Surveys told us that, broadly speaking, 69% of people would work full-time in the office, of office workers. And then there would be a distribution of workers throughout the weeks, you know, some working entirely remotely and some working 3 days in the office. In our 2030 base case, we thought that might drop to maybe 52% of people full-time in the office, and again, a pattern of usage throughout the weeks. I think our new base case is more like that. That the usage of office on a full-time basis, the traditional office model, I think the new normal in 2030 is very different from what we were projecting just prior. And if you want to kind of conceptualize it, just think of the changes that have played out in retail. Nothing happens very quickly in real estate in cities. It all plays out over 1 or 2 cycles. But this will play out, I think, as we go forward. So what does it mean for space demand? We've got a lot of, quite advanced economics translating what do 3 people working 3 days in an office mean relative to 2 people working 5 days and 1 person working 1 day. So you've got to translate these kind of new working patterns into space usage. But we think possibly it adds up to 15% less demand than now. We've got to remember that office employment is still growing. So that 15% is based on a steady state, ceteris paribus kind of typical economic projection. And to a certain extent, we'll see a de-densification of the office as wellness concerns come in. But the impact on the demand for space is notable. And so this is the thing that to take away. If I've got one other chart to show you, this is the long growth in demand for offices in the US economy. So I've got the total space usage going back to 1980. We've had this long, slow increase in occupied office space in American cities. Obviously, some of it is in the edge city, some of it is in the downtown, but over the last 25 years, it has been downtown focused. And this has been the growth engine that we've all been, that all of our outcomes are kind of anchored around. All of the changes have been driven by this growth engine. I think it's about to plateau. I think in the Western world, we may well have just hit peak office. In any case, what does it all mean for our purposes? So again, I think office, we thoroughly believe in the future of the office at CBRE. This is what all of our clients are telling us. But instead of it being the single focus of a working ecosystem, it's going to be the center of a more flexible set of operations and the way companies organize their workforce. I think flexibility is the key going forward. 1 or 2 of the speakers have already referred to that, and I've got my previous job was in central London, and I've got here the brilliant Georgian house, which was set up as a single family home in the 18th or 19th century. After Second World War, became some of the most highly priced offices in the world, and now it's gone back to residential. So that's allowed London that particular part of London to retain its kind of commercial edge. We just got to think really hard, and Vincent Tong referred to it. We can't foresee what's going to happen. Flexibility is the key. Of course, if I get my graphic designers working on it, they can conjure up a more interesting type of mixed use urban environment, flexible urban environment going forward. This is our view of what a Class A building will mean in 10 years time. 24-hour, mixed use, flexible, multi-purpose and local power driven. That's what we're thinking. We're already seeing it coming in. But that's how things will change. Flexibility is the key. We've also seen, and again, 1 or 2 people have referred to it, although I've focused in on the office, the other big trend that we've seen, particularly over the last 10 years, is just urban infill of residential, particularly in Western cities. Huge growth of what we call in America multifamily residential, people call apartment living. We've got to make sure that some flexibility in the workplace, doesn't interfere with that very productive trend to downtown living. But I think we've got to recognize that some flexibility, some centrifugal, some increase in centrifugal forces is going to give the suburbs a little bit more chance to capture investment going forward. And indeed, in Western cities, the suburbs are so often neglected. So I think there is an opportunity for the suburbs coming out of current trends. And I think also, don't bother to try and figure this chart out. What we're seeing as well in the States is just a migration away from high cost locations to low cost locations. It's pretty strong. You can see that low cost and high job growth up in the top left corner. What I'm saying here, I think also, again, a feature of the last 20 to 30 years has been not a very convincing set of second tier city strategies. I think it's the opportunity now to launch, for second tier cities to really consolidate some of their position as low cost, high amenity places for people to do high quality work. This won't play out quite the same in the emerging markets. I would say that my colleagues in India tell me we've got really very robust office sector growth in India. And of course, it's one of the ironies of the current political debate that as countries try to drag back manufacturing activity, corporations in Europe and America are offshoring high-level service jobs to the developing countries. So that it won't play out quite the same in the emerging markets is what I'm saying. But by way of conclusions, the digital economy is forcing the pace of urban change. I've given you a very, very surface level description of that. Any one of the slides could be broken into 5 separate sub-trends. And I think the pace of change is quicker than I've seen in 40 years. Retail revolution well underway. New ways of working are just beginning to shape out, reshape the office economy. And don't forget, a lot of our aspirations for urban regeneration rely on an economic engine which is based around offices. We shouldn't overstate it. Neither the office nor the city is doomed, but we need to think creatively about how we can make the most of the emerging opportunities. So back to you, Jason.
All right, thank you very much, Richard. And it's amazing how you can see the retail and office. When you look at right sizing, remote working, and how that correlates to affordable housing. Because obviously if there's less office space, you need more homes to work, right? So it is a true flux, as you shared, and COVID is being that catalyst of defining what that new normal is, which you shared. So thank you very much for some great words. Next, we'll go to Gary Shankar. Gary has had over 25 years of industry experience, with experience in innovation, knowledge management, solutions and practices within governance, risk and compliance. She holds a master's degree in information technology. So I'll leave it to you and you can share your thoughts.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody, and I would thank the organizers for this invitation. I'm very delighted to be here in the second Urban Economy Forum to speak on the role of big data in smart cities. I'm here to speak in my personal capacity and not as a representative of the United Nations office at Nairobi. So I just want you to make a note. When you look at this role of big data in smart cities, let us first understand what is big data. What does it define us? What does it share with us? Big data is kind of an extremely large set of data that you may be analyzing computationally to reveal patterns, trends, and associations with other elements within that ecosystem, especially relating to human behavior and interaction. Simply speaking, big data analysis is implemented to study large volumes of data, to uncover patterns and get insight to extract valuable information. Some of my previous speakers were talking about the land data, and that would have been a useful thing to share and put it in big data to kind of come out with the analytics of how the land has been kind of managed. Now let us look into the characteristics of big data. Big data is characterized by 4 letters of V. V for volume, which we refer to as the amount of data. V for variety refers to the data from multiple sources in the form of both structured, unstructured. It could be network data, time series data, geographic data, and so on. And then velocity. Velocity deals with the rate at which the data flows from various sources. Big data flows is massive and continuous. So the kind of tools that you need is different from the normal data tools that we have. Then the last V is a variety. Variety refers to the uncertainty of data that you could deal with. It could be quality, or it could be accuracy of data, or it could be trustworthiness, and so on. So this understanding with this understanding, let us move on to see the understanding of to understand the smart cities and define what these characteristics could be. And also to see how big data contributes to smart cities, and also examine 2 areas where I would like to share a little bit about the smart energy generation, and as well as we will see about economic prosperity. Smart cities use digital information and communications to improve the urban services with respect to quality, performance, and human well-being. Smart cities can contribute to reduction of cost and resource consumptions, and effectively and actively engage with the citizens. Smart city applications are developed with the goal of improving the management of urban flows and allowing for real-time responses to challenges. Smart cities could mean different things to different people, and the conceptualization varies from region to region, country to country, and so on. But smart city initiatives are dependent on big data. Smart cities use 2 important technology. One is Internet of Things, which we call it as IoT, which provides us the massive data streams from various infrastructures it contains. And this data needs to be tamed, analyzed, and harnessed to create smart city services. But this data, where will you go and analyze? Where will you go and tame it? And for that, we need big data. Big data platforms helps us to look into the data provided by Internet of Things and to help cities transfer that data insight that can improve quality of life. So if you look at smart cities, definitely it has 2 important technology components on which it is built. Now let us move on to see how the technology and data can be used with an example. Let us take an example of a smart energy generated by wind trees. Wind trees are urban solutions to wind power. This was wind tree is a concept, or as a kind of a clean energy concept developed by French entrepreneur Jerome Michaud. He developed a cost-effective way to harness the wind into clean energy. Wind trees could become a source of renewable energy in smart cities. So the wind turbine trees generates clean energy, and urban environment where streets could be planted with these wind trees on both sides to generate a kind of energy that can help to light up the street lights. Similarly, we could also use solar panels on windows in cities that could generate enough energy. And all these are getting generated from the infrastructure, which Internet of Things passes into the big data platform to help you understand how and to measure the data that is being generated, or the energy that is being generated and consumed. So that way, if you look at big data and smart cities, they help each other to kind of improve the quality of life. The next important thing that I would like to talk about using big data is economic prosperity. There could be a lot of other uses, but I'm purposefully focusing on economic prosperity just to bring in the context of how Urban Economy Forum could kind of utilize this big data trends. Here, the big data trends on venture capital firms by gender is a case that I would like to share here. When you look at the data trends coming out of big data for venture capital firms and by gender, you see women are highly underrepresented across the technology ecosystem. That causes a kind of an insight for urban economies to really think about what kind of goals that they need to pass on to smart cities. If you look into further to see how venture capital firms are performing, you can see that about 12 to 15% of decision makers in venture capital firms are only women. In other words, women only represent 12 to 15% of the venture capital firms greater than a particular value, let's say $25 million. Similarly, you also see about 65% of venture capital firms do not have any women partners, meaning there is no women investors who are able to write checks. And further, if you analyze where women-funded startups have been, it is consistently seen that historically, the woman-funded capital firms exit faster than the male-led startups. So these insights tells us from how and what we can do to support women to be successful. This calls for a very strong action by economic forums to advise smart cities to include smart goals. One of the smart goals should be to significantly increase percentage of venture capital funds going to companies with a woman founder. And governments, various public forums, private sectors, venture capital firms should aid women founders and funders with access, guidance, and support to accelerate their success and propel economic growth in smart cities. So big data plays a major role in helping to understand how the growth patterns are impacted. And this could be a way that we could help economic prosperity in smart cities by equally involving women entrepreneurs. As well as the same kind of analysis can be compared for youth. Youth in smart cities or youth in any cities, we could kind of use big data data to carefully analyze the availability of youth and the gender gap in youth and in social entrepreneurship to leverage the benefit we could pass on to them and to help them to grow in their own economy. Moving forward, big data provides the quality insight and support by way of trend analysis with respect to women, youth, and other parameters in smart cities. And it also helps you to share the training availabilities with respect to opportunities in different cities and also sharing the government information on schemes and incentives for startups and also helps in availability of venture capital firms. So women founders can utilize trends and data points shared by big data to determine which ecosystem to target when they are on the fundraising trail. So moving forward, what could be the situation with big data? Big data could really help urban economy forums and various other forums to kind of come with an entrepreneurial pitch that are non-biased. And it could also help to protect individual privacy by anonymizing data. And that way it would help to give clarity on various other parameters. And it would help to engage with diverse innovators and entrepreneurs that could include youth and women and ensure more women are included at the early stages of venture capital funding for startups. And it could also help smart cities to build and expand on youth and women networks. These networks could in turn be very useful for startups from various other pockets. And it could also experiment with inclusive practices and expand pipelines of innovators and entrepreneurs. When we look at pipeline of entrepreneurs and innovators, the big data provides an insight into the different types of digital divide within the smart cities. Those digital divides are something to do, like gender-based digital divide or age-based, to talk about youth, and income-based. So those insights could really help to foster the success of these venture capitals. And it will also establish inclusive pro-innovative rules or pro-innovation rules and design inclusive decision-making process. What does that mean? Government should be able to invest into these big data research and stewardship, as well as establish robust legal framework and technical form. That's what I mean by inclusive pro-innovation rules. That will be the legal framework. And design inclusive decision-making process, that would be the technical framework, to ensure big data is accessible and responsibly used for public good. That's from me. Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I could help you.
All right, thank you very much, Gauri. It's great to hear how big data and information can tackle these SDGs in as you shared, absolute non-biased manner, and how we can strive to economic prosperity with something like information and data towards smart cities and urbanization. So thank you very much for sharing. Next, we will move to Monica May. Monica is a senior manager at KPMG. She's an experienced leader with over 18 years of experience in the financial industry, as well as the IT sector. She's a driving force in sustainable development within the financial landscape, and holds an MBA with specializations in finance and law from the University of Oslo. So, last but not least, Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Am I on? So no, I don't think like. Now, can everybody see me? Yeah. Thank you so much for the invitation and for letting me participate in this important issue. I think it's a very interesting dialogue. I have a presentation. Can I just put that up? Can I share that one? Okay.
Are you wanting me to share it on your behalf?
No, no, I could share. You can start sharing. Okay, well, like I said, something happened now. Let me see. Okay, and I go. So now, do you all see it?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you so much. So my focus on this is of sustainable finance and its role in the transformation toward a more sustainable goals on all areas, actually, as a powerful tool. The point or the agenda I will go through is first just some relevant definitions, so we're on the same page, supporting other things I'm saying. I will be focusing quite a lot on EU's Green Deal and sustainable finance, and question mark if this is a tipping point toward a positive direction, and then look at the coherence between EU Green Deal and UN's work on financial and economy and international standards, and some words about the way, how I see the way forward. So just to start with, when it comes to terminology, there's been kind of a confusion. Sustainability has a lot of names. So what is ESG, which is a term the same as the Sustainable Development Goals? And since I'm talking about finance, I will just say yes and say that ESG is the finance sector's terminology of sustainability. They divide it into three, but you can also see if you put the sustainable goals within, you see the more nuances you find a sustainable development goal, at that one goal can cover, for example, both social and environment, but altogether we are talking about the same thing, just to be clear on that. And then I very much like to use this donut economy, which is called. I assume most of you have heard about the planetary boundaries. That is the outer ring, defining 9 environment areas, which if we trespass the boundaries, we will experience irreversible damage, which we don't want to do. And we have already trespassed 4 of them. Most important, or as important as an environmental boundaries we have to stay within, is also the social boundaries. And here I think, so the aim here is to ensure that there's no falls short on life essentials, while ensuring collectively we do not overshoot or pressure on Earth life supporting system. And looking at the social dimension on this one, they are covering what new urban agenda is addressing. That's really pointing out the importance of promote sustainable, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, achieve gender equality, equity and the empowerment of women and girls, facilitating access of all cities regarding their age, race and gender, and so on. So this is this is kind of the model to use towards being sustainable. And the last model, I'll just go through as a terminology, is the country overshoot days, which probably many of you also have seen, but this is about how we overuse or scarce resources. Today, the world use about 2 times what the Earth can produce in a year, and that's not sustainable. That's quite, and here I also marked when during the year a country or a region is finished using its portion of what it can use. So I mean, the developed country is of course the worst when it comes to using resources. We have all known that all what I'm presenting so far has been known since the 1970s, and still we haven't managed to go that far. We had a paradigm shift in 2015-2016 with the Paris Agreement, and in the month later came the Sustainable Development Goals, and then in 2017 we got the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, all tightening the focus, the commitment, and we kind of had a peak, but still it goes too slow. And now when we are, somehow I'm missing a slide here, but okay, we are facing the pandemic. And what have we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic so far, which is our latest? And for the cities, the COVID-19 represented a ground zero situation, because 90% of the infected, they were from the cities. So, and earlier this year, we were afraid that the pandemic would take away the focus from sustainable development. And luckily, we have seen otherwise, actually the contrary. So now we will say that it is time to reflect on how we will live in the cities going forward, and focusing on developing towards a green, resilient and inclusive economy recovery, including high ecological transformation and job creation, as well as address climate and pollution crisis, which all are hitting cities quite much. So then to the big question for me here is, I'm claiming that EU's Green Deal and sustainable finance is a tipping point toward a more sustainable economy. And in 2018, sustainability, you can say, reached political legitimacy on a global level. But and today, leaders all over the world are speaking on an existential crisis. The climate emergency is discussed on countless panels and summits. Commitments are being made, big speeches are given, but yet when it comes to action, we have a long way to go. So what makes EU Green Deal and sustainable finance initiative a potential game changer. And that's the core of my message here. So far, we have been good of defining what are the problems and the challenges, and that is very good shown in the planetary boundaries. And what are the targets? And those we have managed to define in Paris Agreement and SDGs, but we are still striving with the how to solve the challenge and reach the goals. We have actually used over 50 years now on that one. But EU, when in representing its Green Deal, has a plan on what to do on both political and private sector levels. When it comes to political, they actually will now provide a lot of rules. So far, in all these 50 years, sustainability actions has been voluntary. That's still some will be, but they have put a lot into legislation, and the legislation that gives meaning. And they also come with guidelines, strategies, policies, action. They are doing a lot of collaboration cross-region globally. They take initiatives, they show direction, and they also have a coherence in their overall activities within the strategy. When it comes to private sectors, they are providing a lot of support to enable private sectors to become tomorrow's winners. And they also have a plan how to coordinate a coherent, disruptive shift in sector value chain for transition to circular economy, which is core in saving our resources and also save a lot of the environment. And finally, they have a financial plan to support. So they don't only speak, they have really put a lot of actions in place. So that said, this is an illustration of what it covers. I mean, the Green Deal is a kind of overreaching plan. The two main activities, there's a lot of activities, that's sustainable finance, because they're using finance to drive the changes. And then there is the circular economy. They have a plan for financing €1 trillion. And in the box in the middle just show that the two, sustainable finance and circular economy, covers all these areas and more. And these strategies, they also, with them, they follow legacy. I just hadn't place to put it also. It's not just words and strategy, there's also legacy and action and governance structure and new roles and people appointed. So it's action behind it. And so they, what they strive for is a new growth strategy that transforms the union into a modern economy where they transition to a sustainable, a circular economy. Economic growth detached from reuse of resources. That's the hard part, but that's what circular economy is about. And everything in the Green Deal is building on, based on the Paris Agreement, Sustainable Development Goals, and planetary boundaries. So it's building on that to reach those goals. That's their aim. It's also about improving the well-being of people, making climate neutral and protecting a natural habitat will be good for people, planet, and the economy. And this is very much core of what we focus on when it comes to urban sustainability. And they do this, and they have planned, and here's where the regulation also comes in, to make sure that we become climate neutral in 2050, protect human life, animals, plants by cutting pollution, help companies becoming world leaders in clean production and technologies. We should have economic growth, and ensure a just and inclusive transition. And this last, I mean, that's been a word, a lot of wording and maybe less action the last, for a long time. But here they also have actions for ensuring they have a just transition mechanism that facilitating employment opportunities in new sectors and those in transition. They're offering reskilling opportunities, improve energy efficient housing, in investing in to fight energy poverty, and facilitating access to clean, affordable and secure energy. And they also have fund for this put aside, so it's dedicated. So when it comes to sustainable finance part, that's also, I mean, that's have 10 main activities, but the foundation of sustainable finance is in the taxonomy. I can say the reason for focus on so much on sustainable finance, I mean, we have actually seen from 2019 an increasement in responsible and sustainable investment voluntarily, but it still goes too fast. In 2019, 40% of the fund flow in Europe was from into sustainable fund. Green bonds, we also see an increase in 2019. It doubled from, it was a 50% increase from the year before. And so far this year, the first half of this year, it's 90% increase even with the corona. But still, the pace, the problem is not the initiative, the will, it's the pace, it's too slow. So to speed up, the taxonomy is a legislation which help to release the power of finance to support and import as an important driver for transformation towards the sustainable agenda, the 2030 agenda. So the purpose is to facilitate the essential role of finance for transformative sustainable changes. I mean, everything is, we have to start to transform in existing industries, and this is not just in Europe. This is to release the power in finance globally, and also the legislation is, they have a goal that will be applied globally, and I come back to that. There also the estimation has shown that it requires 6.35 trillion euro a year to meet the Paris goal. So there's a lot of finances, both from private, from public and private, and special efforts here. The most important contribution to the EU's environmental goals is to transform existing business all over the world to become more sustainable. And how are they doing that? Yes, they're doing that because with the taxonomy defining which business activities that can be approved as sustainable. Today, there's been no definition up to today. So there's a lot of greenwashing, claiming sustainability, and maybe there's a 3% sustainability, but you cannot say the difference between that and 50% sustainable activity in a business. So now there's the same definition for everybody. And there is also legislation about disclosure. The finance is bound by the legislation, so they will look for, and we can see from already from 2019, they have acknowledged that sustainable business is the one with less risk and they're attractive. So they go for they go to find sustainable businesses. And now to be attractive for the finance as a company, if you wanted to you need money either by loan or by getting an investor, you have to show by these definitions that you are sustainable. And the definition and how you are to also the criteria to be sustainable. I mean, the foundation is of course this sustainability goal. So they take environmental part and put it into 6 environmental goals. And you have to do 3 things. You have to contribute significantly to one of these goals. But even if you do that, and this is not on a company level, it's on an economy activity. So a company can have a lot of different economy activities and you assess each activity. But even if you are contributing significantly, you also have to make sure that you do no significant harm. That means no negative impact on other goals. And you have social safeguard. And this is also a very good driver for urban focus, because the social circle we were talked about, that means you provide all business have to make sure that they're not doing any significant harm either to environment or people to get approved as sustainability. There's still not a requirement to be positive active, but we all know today there is a lot of negative impact already, and that is not acceptable anymore. So taxonomy in practice, that is, sustainable investments has gained, as we've seen, and investment has gained popularity in recent years, and it's fast becoming a mainstream pursuit, whether it is to mitigate risk, identify opportunities, or align values. More investor, institutions, and individuals are incorporating environmental, social, and governance factor into the investment choices. The taxonomy defines which business activities can be approved sustainable, and for the first time, all market actors apply to one definition. This will affect the finance investment analysis and the prices of the company. We will see price changes, and companies must adapt to the same requirement if they want finance institution or other stakeholders to perceive them as sustainable. The demand for sustainable investment will drive companies to transform their business model to support sustainable development. It will also make them more resilient, and they will also increase their competitiveness. So this is what EU does, and then is there a coherence between all this work EU has done and the UN and international standards? And yes, I mean, these are some of the core guidelines we have had internationally for years. These are part of the new taxonomy regulation when it comes to do no significant harm and ensure social safeguard. These are the standards that has to be met to get credited as reach the criteria for being sustainable. Then you have, this is the front page of PRI's website. How good is good enough? Why the EU platform on sustainable finance matters, they say. And they have been very active in the development of the sustainable finance in the taxonomy. They've been participating in the technical working group. So they've been part of it all the way. And PRI, as you know, they have global signatories. They're not only from EU. The same goes for financial, as a UN financial initiative. They are also, for the last years, been working with different regions around the world about how to apply. Of course, they use voluntarily because the rule doesn't apply, but we all gain if doing the same thing in a coherent way. And there's a lot of interest. So this has been going on for a year. And so, knowing this, what's the way forward? And EU, they have said that they could take the role as a global leader, but to lead the way, but they hope for others to follow and take use of the effort, because there's a very impressive work they've been doing in very short time, but they have based it on 6 years on research, because they had this research program Horizon 2020, which I think a lot have heard about, and they used all the research going on for 6 years to underpin and build this all these actions on. So they are going to work with Africa to bring climate environment issue to the center of the relations, engage with G20 countries, which are responsible for 80% of global greenhouse gas. They will establish the environment, energy, and climate partnership with Eastern Partnership and Southern Neighborhood, and also work with Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, and Pacific. And these are dialogues that already started and are ongoing. So my last message comes actually from Mark Carney, which is a Canadian economist, saying firms ignore climate risk will go bankrupt. He used to be governor of Bank of England. He's now moved back to Canada and started to work in an investment bank with responsible and sustainable investment. But I want also to say how he is supported by the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. They claim the following: we are soon beyond capital risk. Inaction is no longer an option. The increased pressure is too great and society is cracking. For social license depend on our ability to lead, because business cannot succeed in society that fails. And without business and growth, we are all in trouble. So my measures, knowing that we have an opportunity now with a lot of very different kind of work coming from EU. Now it's a global opportunity, not only to call for action, which we have been doing for quite a while, but also to carry out and implement the action. We should build on all the good efforts done so far by UN and EU and companies being role models to strive to cooperate in a coherent way going forward. We still have a chance to reach the 2030 goals. And since new changes can't be made without being financed, the finance sector, together with new technology, entrepreneurs and governance, have a key role to play in the journey towards 2030, which is only 10 years ahead of us. So that's my message. Thank you so much.
All right, Monica, thank you very much. It's just exciting to see how, both from an eco perspective to the economic perspective, how things will become more sustainable in the future with a defined action plan, as you shared earlier. So on that note, to wrap up this session, I want to formally thank all of our speakers and participants so far on behalf of myself, the steering committee, and UEF. I want to welcome those of you that are just, joining us now, and to those of you that have been there in the beginning. Very great data, great conversation. I'm looking forward to a successful day 1 and 2 carrying forward. So again, formally thank you from myself, and I'll pass it on to you, Alex, to go on to next steps.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you so much for curating that session. As always, it's great to have your support at UEF. We are now transitioning to our concurrent sessions. We will have 2 breakout sessions running side by side. Evan, if you can open up those rooms, please. And while we do that, we'll have breakout room session will be curated by Delia Reish, which theme 1, session 1, urban economy theories and actions, and theme 2, session 1, which will be sustainable banking and municipal finance, led by Eugene Vandenberg. So everyone, Zoom has done an update, and you can now choose your breakout room, which is great. So there is a button on the bottom right of your screen. I will share with you. Can I share? No, it won't let me do that. Anyways, if you go to the bottom of your screen where you can see participants and chat, you can hit the breakout room button.